Hello, OWASP community. My name is Jim Amico. I'm one of 7 global board members of the OWASP Foundation. This is our June 27th, 2014 meeting. We have with us in the room, we have Tobias and Fabio, 2 other of our glorious OWASP board members. And we're expecting to have Sarah Basso and Josh Sokol arriving in just a few minutes, so we'll have a voting quorum. Right now, this is an unofficial board meeting until we have a full quorum of at least 4 members so we can have a voting board meeting. Today's discussion is going to be on primarily committees 2.0 as well as
a list of other topics, as you can see from our agenda, which I'm just sharing. Can you see?
Yes. Let me jump over to Tobias for a moment here. So please go ahead, Tobias. Please.
These meetings are recorded. As you can find all status updates for the board at owasp.org. If you go to About OWASP, and then you can follow the link to the board documentation. So these recordings will be available afterwards. If you have any questions, feel free to post them even during the meeting, or if you like, yeah, I think that's the best channel. Yeah, the topics we have on the agenda for the afternoon are Committees 2.0, to talk about potential project manager support administration function for the future, a discussion about project summits, and yeah, a further longer list of other topics, as you can see right now. Good. I think we can kick off, or we wait for the other 2 people to.
We're now live.
So we kick off.
Broadcasting. We are live. So let's get started. I want to hold off on the committees 2.0 discussion. I think without a doubt, at this point, we really need to bring community committees back to OWASP. I think it's important. I think Josh, myself, and those board members present really believe that we want to put a lot more empowerment into the community and have community members making more and more decisions about how to run and what is best for OWASP. The idea that 7 board members really run the organization, first of all, I don't believe that's true. And second, we want to make it really clear that and set better policies and procedures and committees to make more codified and not just an idea that the board does not run the organization, that the membership does. And we're working to formalize committees 2.0. If you would take a look at the URL for this board meeting, the June 27th board meeting, you should find 2 major links that we're going to talk about today. And Tobias, I'm gonna grab the screen for just a moment here.
Yes.
So I'm going to take over the screen sharing for just a second.
Please.
So when we begin this discussion, which I hope starts in just a few minutes, there's going to be 2 major links that we're going to be focusing on. First of all, we have the committee's 2.0 proposal that came from GK and Kate Hartman, our staff members, and it's really breaking down all of the challenges that we've had in 2008 when we first started committees, and 2014, some ideas of how to reinitialize the committees in a way that's going to address all the problems that we had last time we had a committee structure. And the second proposal that I'd like you to read is also Josh Sokol's Google document, which is linked off the main board page. And let me just take you there. So if you just go right now, just go Google. Oh, here's to get to it. Just go Google OWASP board. Click on the main OWASP board link, and go on the agenda for 2014 tab. And then you'll see upcoming 2014 meetings. And today is June 27, 2014. Let's click on that link. Yeah, let's do that. And if you scroll down a bit, you should be able to see I'm going to take you even deeper down this rabbit hole. My apologies. You go to meeting minutes. That should be an open document that anyone can look at. And in the meetings minute document, which I have right here already preloaded, if you just scroll down a bit to committees 2.0, You'll see the review. You'll see Josh Sokol's proposal, as well as the detailed staff proposal. And I'm going to grab a copy of these right now, and I'm just going to dump it into the Google Hangout. So those of you who are looking at Google Hangout comments, I'll dump both of those for you. And forgive the circuitous route to get to those links, but that's what we're going to be discussing today as soon as Mr. Sokol, who should be here momentarily, joins this cast.
I'm here already, Jim.
Love you, Josh. Josh, thanks for joining. And would you care to kick off the discussion about Committees 2.0? Are you feeling that?
Man, it's 7 o'clock in the morning here, but I am feeling it. Sorry.
No, after you. I'm actually gonna, even though you're not, I'm gonna click on you. I'm gonna click on. Josh, would you like me to put up your document while you're discussing, or would you like to do that?
Yeah, go ahead and put up my document. That's fine.
Okay, so I'm going to give myself precedence here. I'm going to go to the... There we go, Josh. Can you see that on your screen well now, Josh?
Yeah, I've got it pulled up as well. Thanks, Jim. Okay, so Committees 2.0.
Hey, before we get started, Josh, the rest of the board, we spent a good while reading this carefully. We put a whole bunch of comments in there for you, so we're all up to speed on this, and
okay.
We're eager to hear what you have to say.
Yeah, so I think most of you guys are aware that I actually was the chair of one of those committees. I was on one of the original committees. I was the chair of the chapters committee for a period of maybe a year. And during that time, there were definitely some issues. I kind of went through some of the comments that you guys had here, and I think the key here is the empowerment thing. Even though I had what was one of the more active committees, I would say that empowerment was still lacking at the time. And it wasn't the empowerment to do stuff. We felt like we could do things like change the chapter leader handbook, as an example. The empowerment was really where it came to spending money. If I wanted to do, for example, the Austin OWASP chapter was doing some stuff with videos, and so I put together this setup that was about $500, and I thought, hey, it would be great to send these out to other chapters who are struggling. One, to give them the ability to do video within their own chapter, and another to be able to record their own video and broadcast it and capture that data. That was something that required money, about $500 a chapter. But there was no, official pool allocated towards, us actually taking action in that regard. And so every single decision that we had ended up having to go up through the board, had to get board approval and come back down, and it tanked any sort of agility for the committee. So the Committees 2.0, the idea behind this is to actually bring agility to the committees, bring empowerment to the committees, and basically allow them to act, within the scope as the board would effectively act. It gives the OWASP leaders who are involved in those committees the ability to spend money, the ability to take action, the ability to make decisions within that scoped area. And so that was kind of the driver behind this. I would like to see, and this was one of my pledges when I was running for the board, I would like to see us move back to a system where we're empowering our leaders. And some of these decisions aren't all board or all staff. It should be community decisions, and so this is part of that effort. At this point, a number of people have reviewed it. A number of people other than me have contributed to edits and things like that. So it's probably best to just kind of walk through the document itself. To start with, we have the statement of intent. Working with Johanna and Dennis Cruz, we basically drafted the statement of intent, and for round one at least, we decided that the projects committee would be a great place to start this. There's already a lot of effort going in there. Johanna's been doing a great job kind of pushing that forward, and I think that we all feel like she should be empowered to kind of push forward with this initiative. So that's what we have in here. Now, that doesn't mean if somebody else says, hey, I want to start a new chapters committee, I want to start a governance committee, you know, whatever, it doesn't mean that we would preclude that. It just means that projects committee has already signed on and said, hey, we want to push forward with this idea. Now, once we go into the operational model, starting with an introduction, it's really basic. It just says, hey, we want to empower our leaders. That's it. So that's the whole goal of this document. The high-level proposal here is that we would once again reinstate the committee structure for participation in key aspects of our organization. And then I noticed that it's highlighted here the difference between the proposed committees of the past will be empowerment to take action. And I know that there were a couple people who commented previously that the old committees were empowered to take action, and as I said before, while the empowerment may have been implicit, perhaps, it certainly was not explicit. There were not rules in place to guarantee funding for the committees. There were not rules in place to say, hey, you guys can act and, you know, let the board know of your actions later. It was really, you know, you guys can act, but if you're doing anything that happens to modify, you know, anything that the board cares about, which is everything, then you had to go back and let the board know of that. Committee creation. So the idea here is I wanted to make it very easy for any member of our community to basically create a committee. Creating a committee should be relatively low barrier to entry. Really put it out in the public, say this is what I want to do, I want to create a committee, here's why, and then define a scope for that committee. And I think it's very important that that we do define a scope, because that's what we're going to use to gauge, is the committee doing what it was intended to do, or is it doing, you know, trying to do something else. And that's also how we're going to look at the decisions that are being made by the committee and say, you know, were they in the right to make these decisions? So after some community discussion, the OWASP Board of Directors would basically establish whether there's a conflict with any existing committees via that scope, and then assuming that we have qualified leadership for the committee, no conflict of interest, and then perceived majority support by the community, i.e. nobody, you know, saying absolutely not, we shouldn't have this. And if the board has no major arguments, a simple majority vote by the board of directors would create that committee. The committee scope would be scoped to what was initially proposed for the new committee. And if anybody in the community feels that the committee has taken actions outside of that scope, we basically bring it up on the list. We say, hey, you know, this person has this complaint, or they bring the complaint themselves, and we discuss. And after the community discussion, the OWASP Board of Directors basically looks at the complaint, they look at the scope that was initially established for the committee, and then if there's an issue there, majority vote says, hey, we can modify the scope to include this new piece, right? Or no, we can't. Membership to the committee. So this has changed slightly from my original draft. My original draft actually had committees being open to every single member of the community, and I think that's still the case. But at Dennis's request, I actually modified this to OWASP leader. Any OWASP leader is welcome to participate in. I'm not exactly sure how I feel about that, and I'd be extremely open to others' feedback as well. But the idea is that we want anybody who wants to participate able to participate in the committee, but then we have people who have participated at length, because that is how we determine, you know, that they have the history on the committee, they know the actions that the committee have been taking. Those are the people who actually get a vote in what the committee is doing.
Josh, just a quick note that for projects, yep. I've seen a trend from Dennis where he wants the advisory committee to be invite only. He wants the project committee to be members only, and I really want, and I think you kind of share this opinion with me. I want to proceed with caution anytime we do something like that, because our DNA is open, radically open, and make no mistake, that is incredibly difficult at times because we have some, interesting members who join the community, myself included. But as challenging as it is, it's fundamental to our core bylaws that we default on the side of inclusiveness and open. That's a huge challenge, but I really think we really want to err in that direction, I dare say.
Yeah, that's kind of where my gut is on this too, and I wanted a process, and I think some of the staff comments echoed this. I wanted a process where anybody could feel free to jump in the committee at any time. They could feel free to put in their input, take on tasks, actually do work. But when it came to the vote, the decisions of how the committee is going to move forward, what actions the committee is going to take as a group, that should be somewhat restricted to people who are actively participating. And the main reason why I do that, we had an issue at LastCon for our planning team a while back where we had a very open group, and the entire time that we're planning the conference, anybody was welcome to join, anybody welcome to participate, put in their feedback. If you had to vote on something, you'd vote on something. It came to the day where we were selecting speakers, and all of a sudden, these people came crawling out of the woodwork who wanted to vote on speakers. They never participated before. They never participated after. It was only the day that we did our selection of the speakers that these people came and wanted to put in their 2 cents, right, wrong, or indifferent. But it did have an impact on who the selections were for that year of the conference. And I want to prevent that kind of situation. I don't want people to take advantage of the system, show up just to skew a vote, and then go away for the rest of the time. So we need to have some sort of criteria in place that says, hey, in order to have a vote in here, in order to be a stakeholder in the committee, you have to have served the committee. You have to have been around for some period of time, know what we've been doing, contributed, and then you get your vote. Does that make sense?
Actually, Josh, this is Tobias. This morning we had the first kind of pre-board meeting, and we discussed criteria for that membership. So after your presentation, I will walk you through what we discussed in the morning, and maybe there are some ideas that we can use to manage that.
Okay, cool. I guess I'll just keep going through here.
Josh, would you mind sharing out your screen, and I'll give you control so we can all see what you're looking at, or?
Yeah, I can.
If you in Hangout, to the left of Hangout, you'll see a little green arrow. Oh, sorry. First, you want to open up the command control panel. You should see Screen Share, and you can choose at what level you can screen share. You can just share out your browser, and boom, we can see what you're up to.
Alright.
Or if it's a hassle, I'll just do it myself, and just tell me to scroll down, scroll up verbally, and I'll do it.
I'll let you do it. I don't want to mess with anything, break anything. So I'm on section 5, committee membership.
Let's go down to section 5, committee membership. Can you see that on my screen as well, Josh?
I can see it on your screen as well. Yeah.
Just verbally tell me, scroll up, scroll down, and you're up. Go for it.
Okay, cool. Make this a little bit bigger. Cool. All right, so that kind of talks about who's participating in. So originally I had this as no less than a 6-month period, demonstrated history of participating on the committee. Dennis suggested moving that down to 3 months. I'm cool with that. Actually, I think his original suggestion was 2 months, and 3 months was the compromise. But I think the idea is there should be some level of participation before getting that vote, right? And then the last piece here is that voting membership in the committee can be removed for reasons of inactivity over a period of at least 6 months or misconduct by a unanimous vote. So I think that it gives us a way to basically call those inactive members, but it allows people to actually have a vote, have a say, be a contributor to the committee. I did read some of the staff comments on this a while ago, saying that they felt like removal should just be automatic for somebody who's not contributing. I don't know how you actually enforce that, and that's kind of the problem. And then there were some comments about staff not playing an active role in the committee, and that makes it even more difficult to do that. I think the comment, I don't know if it was from some Sarah, was that you have to resubscribe to be in the committee after a period of, whatever, 3 months, 6 months. I think that makes some sense. I haven't, fully thought out that idea and what the ramifications are around that. Certainly it involves more of an active role by those people in, just checking in and saying, yes, I want to still be here. And, maybe that's the way to go, but I don't think that handles the removal piece, because from what we've seen in committees in the past, we've had many people who were there who were, members of the committee, voting members of the committee, but they didn't, even if they checked in, they didn't participate. And so I don't know if, I think you have to have more of an active removal process rather than just, yes, I still want to be here, and then move on.
Josh, I really agree with you, and philosophically, whenever you give someone empowerment and freedom, you don't get that in and of itself. You get a lot of responsibility with that as well. So freedom without accountability and the responsibility is chaos. And so I really think that having some kind of accountability structure is really important, and nothing that's extreme. Just a matter of, like, as committees meet and they make promises for deliveries. That's the whole purpose of a committee. At some level, there'll be promises of some kind of delivery that gets recorded and tracked in some way, preferably on a person-by-person basis. Like, a committee can say, we all commit to meeting 3 times in the next 3 months. We commit to accomplishing these 10 discrete tasks to some degree, that the board or the staff or the community tracks those deliverables, and then we check to see if they get done. Integrity is just doing what you say you're going to do. And I don't want to tell committees what to do. I don't want to force committees to have, I don't want to limit the empowerment of committees, but I want committees to say that this is what we're going to do, and to make it and do that as clearly as possible, and then have them called upon that in X number of months down the road. A very simple system of tracking that, and now with that power and with that freedom, we have accountability as well. And a lot of these problems of who gets removed or who stays, or all those get resolved once you have visible accountability, in my opinion.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Now, there is one thing that I will call to attention on here, is that I guess it's rather implicit, but I left off the idea of a committee chair, because I felt like there were situations in the past where a committee chair basically took over the committee and didn't let anybody else have a voice in that committee. I'll refrain from naming any names, but that is a situation where people end up dropping off of the committee. People who wanted to be there, wanted to participate, wanted to take on tasks, all of a sudden feel like, well, why even be here if that person's going to make all the rules, make all the decisions, and then I don't even have a voice here. So for that reason, I left off the idea of a chair. If for organizational purposes we feel like we need somebody to kind of put the organization behind the committee, that's the reason why I had staff in the role that I do. I have a staff member in my plan there to basically create that order, schedule the meetings, make sure that people attend, make sure that notes are being taken, and do the reporting structure of this.
Yeah, Josh.
Yes.
This is Tobias. I can see that you don't want a committee chair to kind of take a committee hostage or something.
Mm-hmm.
I think if we make clear that on the other hand, I would actually like to see the committee just elect their chair, and I mean chair in the function of just scheduling the meetings, okay? Not as in I'm dominating this, as in I'm doing the organization. I'm scheduling the next meeting. I understand what the tasks are. I'm the person who will track and then kind of consolidate stuff. And would you be okay with that, or you think this is really needs to be done by staff? Do I hear you in that?
So I'm okay with that, but I do think that that was one of the problems with previous committees, and I think that I will say that leaving that out was a very deliberate action on my part. I felt like staff they have a better level of objectivity in this situation, and I felt like they're fully capable of handling that scheduling piece, allowing our volunteers to do the piece that they really should be doing, which isn't the scheduling and all the logistical stuff. It's the volunteer part. We want our volunteers to actually be taking action to be updating the chapter leader handbook and updating the project's handbook and helping review projects and whatever the case may be. We want our volunteers to focus on the stuff, the reason why OWASP exists, and allow our staff to handle kind of the logistical pieces of that.
Josh,
yes.
I have a question. Who would, I mean, obviously, I agree with kind of what Jim said before, that accountability is very important. So one part I see in the committees is that people are accountable for their plans, and if they don't deliver on that there is consequences, meaning, well, people are no longer on the committees afterwards. However, to see what a committee is doing, I would like someone from the committee to present these results. And if I have no chair, then who's gonna present these things? Would this be something like a rotating chair, basically, or informal? One person will give the briefing. So do you want these committees to be chairless? Is that what I hear?
Yeah. So my thought is that they should be chairless. So real quick, finishing off community membership, because I think you've kind of moved on to the communication piece.
Yeah, if you like, we can talk about that later. Maybe we let you go through it once, and then we ask the questions. How do you feel more comfortable?
Well, the piece that you're asking about is actually under Section 6. So we'll move there in just a sec. I wanted to note one other thing under committee membership, which is that in order to be a voting member of the committee, in past life of the committees, you had to have, I think, 3 formal statements from somebody else saying, yes, I think this person should be on the committee, here's why. And what I've done is I've basically slashed that down to, you have to have been working with the committee already, which was not a prior requirement, and 2, you have to have written support of either a current committee member or a member of the board of directors. And I think that should be sufficient in order to put somebody on the committee. If somebody else says, yeah, I vouch for this person, they have been around and they should be able to help out here, I think that's more than enough.
Okay, I tend to disagree that is enough, but I let you continue first with the communication. I think I see more needs in how we select the people who are on the bus, because this is usually quite important.
Yeah, the problem that we run into, though, is that we need to keep that bar at a reasonable level to allow people to come on and want to participate. If the bar is too high, then people feel like, well, I don't want to have to do all the effort to go out and get that just so that I can have a voice, just so that I can actually do stuff with the committee. And I think that we saw that in the past. We saw people who probably would have been active participants in the committee, and actually people who were active participants in the committee, but when it came to actual committee membership, they weren't there because they didn't have those prior approvals and whatever. And I mean, for somebody who's new to OWASP, trying to get 3 people to back or joining the committee, that's a hard thing to do.
Josh,
Yes.
I hear you, but I have one massive disagreement problem with kind of what I hear at the moment, and that is, in my view, people can do everything. They do not need, you do not need to be on a committee to do something. Okay, so the perception that you need to be on a committee to do something is inherently wrong in my view. I want the community to foster these activities, but by no means people should require to be on a committee to do anything. Okay.
I agree with you. The difference is we're not saying that you have to be on a committee to do something. What we're saying is, in order to have a voice, in order to have a vote on what the committee does, you do have to be that person.
Exactly.
And that's the key difference. I don't think a lot of people want to go out there and sign up to do something that somebody else decided that they should do. I think people want to go and be a part of the decision-making process and then volunteer to do the stuff that they decided on. Very few people, and you know, if you look at the current, I forget what's called, the structure that the staff set up to basically solicit volunteers and whatnot, you know, that should be a way to get people to actually take action based on things that we need. But at the end of the day, I don't think that's working at least in this regard. We have activities that are out there that people don't sign up for because they have no stake in it. It's just asking somebody to do work rather than empowering them to have a voice and have a say in the work that they're doing.
Josh, I agree with you on the result of the situation. I don't agree with you on the causality that you are making. But I would suggest that maybe you continue with your proposal, and I then give some of the reflections that we had before also in a more consistent, coherent manner, and then we can kind of merge them into one. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
And Josh, I'd also like to propose, I'm going to be quiet just a moment, but I want to propose that we also review the staff committee 2.0 from Kate and GK.
Yes.
And hopefully merge both of these ideas. I think that both of the documents look at this from a different perspective, but I think we're mostly all on the same page. So I'm hoping maybe you can facilitate or participate in that review when you're done with your own document.
Okay.
Mark, rock on. I'm going to mute us on our end, and the floor is yours, sir.
Okay, so let's move on to Section 6, the committee communication. I think this was kind of the area that Tobias was starting to get into anyways. All committees are required to hold their discussions in the open to enable participation by a member of the community. There we go. So the idea here is, you know, obviously OWASP is an open organization. We want to have all of our discussions in the open. Sorry, Tom just talked and I lost my there. So all community discussions, written and verbal, must be archived in a publicly accessible location. So very similar to what we do on the board. All of our communications here, all of our meetings, our agendas, they're all noted. They're all put in a public location so that at any point in time somebody can come back and, you know, review what the actions were, who did what. I think that this kind of gets to your accountability points, Jim, and we're saying that, hey, when committees are taking action, we want to see what those actions are, and we want to be able to hold them accountable for those actions. We have the next piece here, which is that committees are required to notify the OWASP board in writing of any official votes and provide a written summary of actions taken on a minimum of a monthly basis. So this is getting to when committees are taking action, we need to make sure that they're letting the board know, not as a way for the board to shoot them down or say, no, you shouldn't have done that or whatever. This is so that the board, who's our purpose in this process is strategic vision for the organization. This is so that the board can basically check and make sure that we're in alignment with that vision, that the committees are taking action along that line, as well as within the scope of the committee, the originally proposed committee. So preferred communication medium is the public mailing list, but other technologies could be used as long as the information is linked from the committee wiki page. And so we're saying, you know, when you're taking action, we need to make sure that's in a public place. We'd prefer for this stuff to be on the mailing list, but if it's someplace else, that's cool, as long as there's a link on the committee wiki page that says, here's where the information is, and points them where to find that.
Josh, I want to suggest a real subtle change here.
Okay.
I say the committee should be required to notify the community in writing of any official votes, and it's the board's job to review that. I know that's kind of playing a language game here, but it kind of takes away the idea that they're reporting to the board, and it's instead they're reporting to the community what they're doing, but it's the board's job as, you know, the fiduciary whatever of the foundation to review it and give and to you know, do the work of constant review to make sure that the work is getting done and the promises made are happening and the proper bylaws of the foundation are getting followed. All the things that are on our back is having the fiduciary responsibility at the board level. But the report is not to us. The report's to the community, so everyone can comment on that as well. That might be a subtle change, just a suggestion to consider.
I love it, Jim. I think that's an excellent suggestion for changing.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Can you repeat that? You said you what? Or
I said I love it, Jim. I think that's an awesome change. All right, so let's move along there. Committee removal. So the main point with this section is that I want to make it harder to remove a committee than it is to create one.
Josh, excuse me.
One quick sec.
Pardon, Josh. One question. There was one important question that. Oh, I'm speaking here. Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Sorry. We're just sharing one computer at this moment because we want to avoid echo. The question was, who is going to do this reporting? So you saw the comment from Sarah. Who is doing that reporting? Because in the past there seems to have been kind of people asking, but then it was not done, this reporting. So who's responsible for that?
So I would say that the people who are taking action, the people who are taking the vote for the committee, they're the ones responsible, the committee members. And if at any point in time the committee is not following these guidelines, I think the board needs to reevaluate, or the community needs to reevaluate whether that committee should exist because it's not following our process.
Yeah, exactly. We're just asking for at least a monthly update on actions, and if if the community stops getting those, that's a clear indication that we have a problem at the committee level.
It's more the challenge I see is if you make a group responsible for one activity. It is likely that it will not fall through. While if you have one person responsible, then at least you know who you want to hit. So if you tell me the group is responsible in sending one email, I'm not sure that's going to happen.
Let the group self-organize. I mean, there's a lot of models for committee leadership. Yeah. The CSA, the Cloud Security Alliance, they have all 3-member committee leaderships. There's never one committee lead. There's always 3. To help bias get filtered out. So
yeah, I tend to agree, and that's the reason why I didn't address the chair thing. My personal gut is I don't think you should have a chair. I've seen that problem fail, or that issue fail. But if a committee wants to appoint a go-to person, this person is the organizer or whatever, they can do that. It kind of leaves the internal committee structure up to the people who are participating.
Okay, I hear you. Thank you. Yeah. Please continue.
Okay, so section 7 here, committee removal. As I was saying, the goal here is we want to make committee removal far more difficult than it is to create it. So we can create it with a majority vote by the board. The goal with the removal was we basically have to have a unanimous vote. So basically the entire board has to come to the agreement that the committee is not serving its purpose, whether it be it's not adhering to its scope, it's not being effective anymore, for whatever the reason is, the committee would basically decide that we would or the board is deciding via unanimous vote that the committee is no longer necessary and eliminating that committee. So I think that's basically it. we put out there on the list. We say, hey, there's a conflict of scope, there's a concern, whatever the case is. We put out in public so that there's a public discussion on it, and then we hold a vote for the removal. And I think Tobias had put a comment on there that it should just be a majority vote or maybe a 2/3 vote. I think I feel pretty strongly that this should be a unanimous vote. If the entire board can agree that that committee should no longer be there, then I think that we can go ahead and remove it. But I don't want to have the same mechanism, the majority vote, being the mechanism that both creates and removes, because then you have this situation where committees are so dynamic, so temporary, that they're just getting created and removed at the whim of the majority. We want this to be a very clear, this is a strategic thing. We create a committee because there's a need for it. We remove the committee because there's no longer a need for it. And that needs to be very definite.
Josh,
Yes.
I think there's a difference in the voting that you describe. One thing is the voting process for creating a committee. Another thing is policing the committee to what they are doing. So I don't mind to make, I actually support the idea to make committees stable. So you set them up and then you don't just kind of whisk them away. But however, if a committee starts making decisions that are against the goals of the organization, I don't see that as a problem if the majority of the board could overvote this. So these are two different things. Yeah. So my comment was in regards to if the committee makes a decision that is just, for example, in conflict with others, with other strategic goals, then I'm sorry, the board has been elected and the committee has been appointed. So that I would see, that's why my comment is there.
So we actually handle that, I believe, later on in this document. There's a section that talks about the board basically overruling the decision of a committee. And
actually, the wording, sorry for interrupting you, the wording in this case is already like one decision.
Sorry, you cut out there.
Oh,
I'm
sorry.
Can you repeat that?
The wording in the section that you have sounded like this is about specific decisions. It didn't sound like the decision to make the committee. So that's why I had to insert that comment.
No, committee removal is specifically, this is how we remove the committee. If
Yeah,
my wording...
We are talking section 9, accountability.
Correct, yes.
Yeah.
So section 7 is very specifically, this is what you need to do in order to remove a committee.
Yeah, and I mean, my comment was in section 9. So I think you're mixing things.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Yeah. It was 6 o'clock in the morning when I reviewed
That don't have an issue, you know.
Yes.
Hey guys, good morning. It's Tom.
Hey, Tom.
I was just reading your comment here.
Cool.
Continue, Josh.
Hang on, I'm reading what Tom
Add
posted
some
here.
verbal.
Okay. All right. So let's move down to section 8, Jim.
And the mission of the committee is to clearly outline that it's the purpose and goal to have regional representation at a committee level that then would roll up to the quote-unquote a global committee. I know it's additional process and paperwork, but you guys have to understand that we have a hard enough time as 7 board members to coordinate regionally with time zones. It would be phenomenally helpful for the growth of the foundation to recognize regions and recognize regional committees, and then of course that stuff can roll up. So think of it as regional committees can meet as often as needed, and then of course the global committee might meet, I don't know, once a quarter or something to kind of ratify the local committees. Again, we want to do things, sometimes regions are different. Especially when we talk about things like chapters or some of the other cool stuff. Products don't so much, but it does make sense to kind of provide respect to the different regions.
Especially with chapters, Tom, I do agree with you. In fact, if we get enough volunteerism, where we're going to need to have a global chapter committee and then several regional chapter committees, if we have that many people who want to volunteer, that's a great problem to have.
Agreed. That's why I think if you state that, although we may not ever be there, it would be great to have that sort of part of the mission of committees to have regional committees, and if it happens, great. But people should read it and understand that we desire for that to happen.
Josh, is there a place in this doc I could make that note to your satisfaction? Or
So I'm going to make a comment on that. I don't think that what Tom is saying is mutually exclusive of this document. I think that what this document is doing is it's outlined the process for creating a committee, the process for communication, the process for removal. And if somebody wants to say, hey, I want to create the Texas Regional committee for chapters, right? And this is a committee that's specifically designed for the Dallas, San Antonio, Houston, and Austin OWASP chapters to organize amongst ourselves, and we scope it that way. I don't see any problem with that. Again, it all comes down to that scope, and if our scope is we want to take action within the Texas area, and the board says, yeah, that sounds good, let's do that, I don't see any problem with that. Likewise, if the Texas Regional reports up to the South Central United States, which reports up to the North America, which reports up to the global, it doesn't matter to me, and I don't think that affects this document one bit.
The only risk that I see is where you have a global project committee who's establishing certain guidelines and they get ratified. Then some regional committee decides to have a whole new set of rules that may counter what the global project committee is setting as policy. So we got to be aware of that. But I don't think it's going to be a big problem.
If I may jump in as Tobias, I have one concern that bothers me actually quite a lot. I don't want to see an inflation of committees, okay? Because I think committees are probably something stable. You just established that it shall be difficult to remove them, so I don't want them growing like weed and kind of everything is a committee. I mean, that would be really crazy, so please don't make it too easy.
Look, if we have tons and tons of committees and people want that committee structure to volunteer, I don't think it's a problem, Tobias. It means that.
I agree.
So if we have lots of little committees with lots of accountability going on, I think that's actually a good thing. So with respect, I disagree with that. I don't mind a lot of committees. That's a good thing, actually, because that means people are participating, and we have a structure to provide accountability for that participation, and we're empowering them by doing that. I think it's a good thing.
But we have that already. We have projects, we have chapters, we have initiatives. And now you add another one. I mean, I don't mind to have committees. I see the need for it as a stable part. But kind of to have, let's say, 50 committees, I would go nuts.
I don't see a problem with that. I think that's a good thing. We have 50 active committees that are participating. Rock on.
That's the key.
So I think that the idea here is really.
All right, so yep.
I was going to say I think
You have to draw a line somewhere, and all we're trying to recommend was level.
We can't hear you, Tom. Josh, you go, please.
So what I was saying is I don't think that any of that's a problem. I tend to agree with you, Jim. If there's 100 committees that want to be empowered to do stuff, the key here is the scoping, right? And as long as the board has some level of control over what that scope is, and we make sure that there's not a conflict between those committees, right, we can handle that. And in cases where there is a conflict, I think the proposal is simple. Create a subcommittee within your committee where the Global Chapters Committee has a subcommittee that handles the local aspects of Texas or the local aspects of Africa. I don't think that we need to put such stringent requirements in place to dictate how that stuff happens. I think that as a community, that stuff is going to happen naturally. I think that we just need to handle the scoping so that there's not a conflict between the committees.
Josh?
Mm-hmm.
In principle, I'm okay, and you know what? I don't think that we will see a huge inflation of committees in the beginning anyway. Mm-hmm. So I'm fine to go with something, and then if I see stuff going out of hand, I will definitely start screaming. And I think Fabio had some important things to say as well.
And please go ahead, Fabio.
Well, as I participated in the education committee, one of the challenges we had was exactly the time zone differences. So In the end, we were struggling to find you know, a specific time that will suit everyone. And we ended up meeting up, I don't know, the likes of myself with Martin, or people who were, you know, based in Europe, and then the guys in the US meet, you know, by themselves. So the idea of having a kind of a high-level committee and then having, say, regional or more specific subcommittees makes sense. One thing we could do about, you know, this say overgrowth of committees is make sure that they are active, as Jim was suggesting, and we could make sure that, I don't know, if there is a subcommittee that is not active for X amount of time, we just mark it as inactive. We could do all that through the member nation portal. I've seen it working. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at that portal, but it's quite powerful in terms of the functionality. And I think it will actually empower all these communities' efforts in a big way.
Is the member nation portal being used by the foundation right now?
To a certain extent.
And Tobias, one more thing as well. Keep in mind that there needs to be some kind of approval for new committees. So we'll have like a firewall where if unnecessary committees are being proposed, that we can stop that. People can't just automatically form a committee. The community, to some degree, has to agree that it's reasonable. So we'll have a firewall to protect committee explosion that's unnecessary. But again, if we hit a place where we have 50 committees, they are sending in monthly reports, they're all active, and there's hundreds and hundreds of people involved in them, and we have accountability of what their actions are, I think that's an ideal situation, not a bad situation.
I would say it this way: if you make something easy, to create, it must be easy to destroy, and vice versa. So if you want something that's hard to destroy, it must be difficult to create, because otherwise you get inflation. But beyond that, you know, I'm still waiting on a number of topics talking about membership, and I think Josh hasn't even finished his presentation about what he wants to go through, so I'm a little bit unsure whether how we do this. So do we want to jump back, or do you want to let Josh continue and finish his first before we do?
Josh, please continue and finish this review. If we only cover this one topic, it's okay.
Okay. So Section 8, Empowerment. The goal of this proposal is to empower our leaders to be able to take action on behalf of the organization, so no board vote is necessary for any initiative of the committees, provided that the following is true. The first point is the action is within the stated scope of the committee. And so the idea here is that the committee, when it's created, we define a scope. If that scope ever needs to change, a vote needs to take place in order to change that. As long as the actions of the committee are within that scope, meaning that we've already acknowledged that they've been empowered to do that thing, let them do their thing. I don't see any reason why we should stop them from that. Number 2, the action can be assumed by the predetermined budget of the committee. So in committees past, each committee had a budget that was decided at the beginning of the year, that was then applied to that committee, and the committee basically had initiatives that went into that. They had ideas. They had their ideas of what would happen with that pool of money. I think Sarah had the proposal here that there shouldn't be a budget for the committees, that instead they should pull from the global bucket. I'm not necessarily sure that I agree with that. The idea was that if there's a global bucket, then we now shift focus back to the board, back to the staff, in terms of allocating those funds, because it's part of a global bucket, and we need to make sure that the funds are, being spread evenly, and that nobody's, somebody doesn't come up if it's a $50,000 bucket and a committee comes and says, I want $50,000, then nobody else gets anything, right? And that's not the approach that we want to take. We do want to make sure that this is being controlled, that there is a method to the madness, and the foundation doesn't have unlimited funds, so we need to work within those kind of guidelines. So yes.
Just from my understanding, how much budget would you see for a committee, roughly?
I think that the idea is that the committees put together a budget with what they want, and then we allocate funds based on that. I'm not going to go out and say that the chapters committee needs X thousand and the projects committee needs X thousand. That's not my role in this. I think that's the committee's role in this, and that's actually how committees were handled in the past. Was the committees got together, they determined what projects they were going to be working on, they determined their budget, and then that was fed back into the foundation budgeting process.
I'm with you, and my take on this is step one is the budget, and and step two is giving them the funds for that budget. That way, a committee doesn't have to make a request every time they're buying a piece of pizza, but they can set a budget out for many expenditures so it can be reviewed, and then they're granted those funds. I don't want to give a committee funds by default because they'll feel the need to spend it. I want to ask them what they need and then provide the funds. That seems a better way to protect the foundation financially.
Yep. Yeah. And I think if the committee has an idea that they want to do that they don't have the funding for, then ask, right? It's not like we're saying, no, you can't do anything if it's outside of your bucket. We're saying that your committee has been scoped to these actions, it's been scoped to this budget, and if you want to go outside that scope, you just have to ask. We put it out there in the community, have the discussion about the relevance and whatnot, and then take the vote, move forward. I don't think that we're precluding that. I think what we're saying is, this is the scope of the committee, this is what you're empowered to do without involving the board. And I think that's the important distinction to make. This is not restricting the committee, this is just saying, here's everything that you can do without that further approval.
Josh?
Yes.
I can see that the community, I mean, obviously money is an important factor in getting stuff done. Mm-hmm. So I can see that. I would like to see some thought going into making sure that these budgets are not ring-fenced and then not spent. Because that is one of our most common problems we have today with projects, with chapters. There's a lot of ring-fenced budgets that are not used. And if we have that, I would like to encourage the people who kind of think about this, how can we make sure that these budgets are spent and not just ring-fenced and we can't use them there?
And I think that's easy. The budget has a time to it. Go ahead, Josh.
There's a very huge difference between chapters and projects and the money that they've earned that are in their accounts that are somewhat ring-fenced and the money that we're talking about for committees. Committees would basically create a budget at the beginning of the year or at the end of the previous year. That budget would then be allocated based on the board budgeting process. So, we do our own budgeting process. That would be factored into that. And then that's the amount of money that they have for the year. And then at the end of the year, they create a new budget. Whatever money was left over is going to get, it's in the general fund. Any money that they request would be handled by the new budgeting process, and you move forward. That's exactly how it would work within any corporation out there, and that's how it would work here. Whereas with the chapters, and I'll use the OWASP Austin chapter as an example, we've put on a conference every single year for the past 5 years or so, and as a result of that, there's money in our chapter bucket. Now we're going through, we're spending that money, but it's the difference is we've actually done things in order to earn that money, in order to be able to spend that money. In this case, we're allocating money from the general foundation pool towards a specific thing.
Josh, this was not about the chapter. This was more about being careful that we don't ring-fence stuff that's then not used.
I agree 100%. And I agree with Josh that the ring fence around chapter funds and the ring fence around what committees will do are very, very different, because chapters have, this is important to note the difference. Chapters have money that does not need to be budget allocated. That's their savings that they may want to use for a variety of different future purposes. And so, when a committee is requesting funds, it's a little more of an action committee request. And so they set a budget, they get it approved of, and if they're not using that in the timeline that they specify, not that we specify, but that they specify, then that should be de-ring fenced. Again, I'm asking for accountability, and not that the board or anyone should tell a committee what to do. I want the committee to say what they're going to do. I want the committee to say what money they need. And then they should just do what they're saying, and it's part of our job as the staff or community or board to help verify that those promises are actually happened.
Yeah,
So,
and I will say that during year one of the committee, that we are going to have the problem where they didn't have a budget, there wasn't money allocated, and so we do need to find money for them from somewhere. And I think in that situation, I think what Sarah says makes sense. We pull from that global pool, and we're going to have to be a little bit more cautious about what we greenlight because it does pull from that global pool. That said, year two, they create the budget. We, tell them yes, yes, yes. Here's the things that we can do. And then that's the money that they have allocated to move forward. The money is ring-fenced for the period of 1 year. At the end of the year, the budget goes away. They create a new budget, and we make new decisions on how to move forward there. I think that case is very simple. I'm going to say that for chapters and projects, I think that we should leave that out of this discussion entirely, that we should focus on committees. And the reason why I say that is there is a strategic initiative that was decided by the board earlier this year about how to handle, that we needed to make a decision on how to handle the money for chapters and projects and how those accounts work and whatnot. That is a goal that the operations team has right now, and I think that we leave that to the operations team to figure that piece out currently.
Josh, I'm sorry, maybe I shouldn't have used that as a sample, but actually I'm with you that the committee needs some money. So I'm with you in that. I'm probably more on the cautious side in terms of how long stuff is ring-fenced. So I tend to be in the position that if, for example, if a committee says, well, we want this to be expended for action X, which should happen in June, if it doesn't happen by September, it's gone.
I agree with that fully. The idea of yearly budgets, I think that's too much. I think that when committees request funds, I'm guessing it's going to be larger chunks of money for bigger things. I like times put on it. I'm going to have this event or this action, or I need this budget for this date, and if that date passes and there's no activity, de-ring it and the budget's lost by the committee.
And my main concern is that, in the end, the amount of free money that we have in OWASP is actually not that huge. Because there's quite a bit of this stuff is ring-fenced. And then if we are, for example, missing like 30, 40K because we ring-fence it, that's basically one resource that we could not hire. Or that's one major event that we could not do.
So I think what you're saying is that if at a point somebody is asking for money, and I think that we need to be clear about this, if there's a desire to use that money, then we go back and we reevaluate where money is that hasn't been spent. And there's nothing wrong with that. That also is a part of standard corporate operating procedures, is if there's a project that requires additional prioritization and there's another project that needs lower prioritization, you swap the funds and you allocate towards the higher thing. So I think that
we are in alignment.
Yeah, I think we treat this just like any other corporate situation would.
Okay.
You have a budget, you try to stick to the budget, but you can always deviate from that budget in cases where there's a higher priority.
Yeah. Okay.
I think really the point here is that I don't think that we can just say there's one big global pool of money for everybody to draw from. I don't think you can do it that way, because that doesn't allow appropriate scoping of the committees. We need to have a specific committee pool that they can feel free to spend how they want. That's the empowerment piece of it. Okay, so then number 3 on my list was no contracts are being executed by the committee on behalf of the OWASP Foundation. This is the same thing that we do with chapters, for example. If a chapter wants to sign a contract, they need to go through the foundation for that. Our executive director signs the contract, and then they're then empowered to move on. This is a liability thing. It's not a we don't want to empower you guys to do something. It's strictly if it's a contract, it's a liability for the foundation. We need to track that accordingly.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and Josh, we've had a past conference where people used foundation funds to bring models in. It's like that kind of stuff. We've got to police carefully. So And I'm even happy to have non-board members help in that decision-making process to kind of alleviate the concerns of that the board is like this all-powerful group. But this is really important to me that we honor our fiduciary responsibility to make sure our funds are used in service of charity and the mission.
Hey, Jim, so you bring up a point there that I don't think has any understanding. What models are you speaking of, to be clear?
I don't want to get into that right now, Tom. Please.
Yeah, but if you're gonna,
You shouldn't have brought it up.
Tom, I didn't even mention a conference. It's nothing to do with you. I really don't want to mention it right now. I'm happy to take it offline with you, but no, I'm not ready to do that right now. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm happy to do it at a different time.
Okay, that's fine.
Let's say it this way. I think Jim, you shouldn't have made that comment. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think as a board member, you need to.
Let's move on, Tom. I'm not pointing the finger at anyone in particular.
Yeah. Okay. Jim, for the record,
it's just off topic. If you want to.
Hey, Jim. Hey, Jim.
No, guys,
hey, Jim.
please.
Hey, Jim,
Tom, come on. Let's move on,
Jim,
Tom.
No, I'm not going to move on. For the purpose of a board meeting, if you're going to bring up or make a statement like that about what happened in California, now that someone just gave me a heads up, then you should actually make a statement about it, not just throw dirt or throw a hand grenade and hope it doesn't get recognized. It's very important that you stop this sort of communication. If you have a problem, speak up and specify what it is. That's what's caused all these other issues.
Tom, all I'm trying to say is we've had past issues with foundations funds being spent in ways that aren't appropriate, and I think we have to do a better job in making sure we're honoring our fiduciary responsibility. Okay, let's move on. If you want to keep throwing stones,
then say that.
Throwing stones at
then say that.
But this is.
No, I want you to say that though, Jim. I don't want you jumping in and throwing hand grenades into a meeting.
Hey guys, I think you're both making valid points here. But it's a side conversation to everything that we're trying to do here. Let's save this for a different time. I'd like to keep moving forward on the committee's 2.0 stuff.
Thank you, Josh.
And actually, Josh, you can actually assume that we have read the document.
Okay.
So you can go relatively brief because we have gone through that.
Okay, I think we're almost done here. I'm making the assumption that while you guys have read, that there's other people who have joined us on this call who have not read it, and so I want to step through kind of the rationale for each of these pieces. So that's why I'm explaining in a little bit more detail, kind of the thought process that went into here. Number 4, I didn't add to this. I would say that it's probably not necessary because I created a separate section for accountability. But if you want to make a case for why you think that should be there, I'm willing to listen, I guess. Jim? It's under section 10. There's a number 4. Committees must be accountable. Sorry, scroll up slightly.
Yeah.
Scroll up to section 10. There, number 4. I didn't add that.
No, that was me. Let me drop it out, Josh.
I think it's handled under the other section, the accountability section.
Okay.
Sorry, I meant 8. Okay. So then the next section here is accountability. So I think the idea here, and Jim hit the nail on the head in several of his comments, is that we have committees that are acting on behalf of the foundation. And so as a separate entity from the board, the committee members are expected to conduct their actions with regard to the OWASP mission, the code of ethics, the board's strategic goals. And so we do need to have this kind of regular gut check in terms of is the committee actions aligned with all these other core OWASP principles. And so for that reason, the committee and its members are ultimately going to be held responsible for the actions that they're taking, and whether they are or are not in line with those principles. So perceived violations, if anybody has any concern about them not being in alignment, they would be brought up to the leaders list along with the evidence, and then there would be a community discussion, and then the board has the ability to veto those actions by a vote. And in my case, I'd put a unanimous vote. If we want to move that to a majority vote, I guess we could do that. I think the the idea in making it unanimous was very similar to the unanimous vote in terms of dissolving a committee. I wanted it to be very difficult for the board to decide that an action by the committee was not in line with the scope, not in line with our ethics and whatnot. And if you can get the 7 members of the board of directors to all agree that there was a problem there, that is far more difficult than getting a majority vote to agree that there's a problem there.
Yeah, and here I divert. Here I divert from your view. So I think, for founding or shutting down committees, I can understand that we should make it difficult, but for kind of if a committee does something outside of their scope, it's not only within their decision room. Okay, so I feel quite strongly about a majority, or at least a 2/3. Actually, I would rather have a majority. And the board is not engaging if there's nothing coming up. I mean, we don't want to touch this stuff. Yeah? So if it's going, I'm fine. I just don't want to kind of overreach, because these committees have been appointed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
This is about legitimacy.
I think the concern is that in the past the committee felt like they weren't empowered because the board would jump in and say, no, you shouldn't do that, no, you can't do that. And if you make it too easy, then I think the tendency is for them to not want to take action, because there's always that fear that the board's going to jump in and overrule them.
But that's misbehavior. That's difficult. I rather deal with that behavior when it happens, than to kind of forbid this and have this kind of self-legitimating process.
I agree that too. At the same time, you don't want to have, if you have one board member that's in conflict, then you've just kind of messed it up, right? So you have to be a majority. It can't be a majority, assuming that you have one board member that's in conflict, and that happens a lot. Therefore, you can still have majority rules.
Okay. I can see that point, especially if you have a board member who is heavily involved in the committees, where that would be a problem. If that's the case, I would suggest moving it to like a 2/3 vote, or explicitly stating that a person who is a contributor to the community doesn't have a vote in that vote, and make it unanimous that way. But yeah, I'm fine with that if we want to modify that way.
I would actually rather prefer that we just keep majority-based voting and don't introduce new voting schemes, because it just adds complexity to an organization unnecessarily. And you know what? If committees come back later and tell me, oh, the board is meddling too much, I'm happy to review that decision. Okay. Let's not shoot something that's not there.
Yeah, and I think that the key here is the transparency piece. So if the committee is taking an action and we feel like that action is not appropriate, that's being brought up on the public list, that's being discussed on the public list, and then the action is being taken in a public fashion.
Okay. I like it. So we are with majority at this moment.
Yeah, I'm okay with majority.
Good.
Okay. So then Section 10, OWASP staff. The idea here is that the foundation would provide staff that would support the active committees. The staff would then participate as a community member, but would not be allowed to vote because of a conflict of interest there. Basically, the staff serves the foundation, the community is the decision-making body, and there would be a conflict of interest if the staff had a say in what the community is basically deciding we do. I have trouble finding the exact situation where this would be a problem, but I definitely see a conflict of interest there in terms of staff goals, staff desires, and the committee goals and committee desires. So I just wanted to leave it at that. The staff member would then be responsible for coordinating the committee meetings, schedules at least monthly, taking notes, assembling monthly action summaries, calling inactive committee members, and ensuring compliance with the scope. of the policies and procedures. And I think actually that's probably the area where the conflict of interest is most, is the staff is kind of serving as this go-between between the board, who's making sure that they're compliant with the scope and the policies and the procedures, and we have to trust that the staff is there to kind of handle that aspect. Whereas if they were a member of the committee, then there would possibly be a conflict in that nature.
So for continuity, would it not be a good idea then to at least have, again, modification, allow the appointed staff member to have a vote that's recorded, and that way we can determine if in fact people are in agreement or in strong disagreement. I think it's good for the record to say, hey, if you're an employee and you're working on this particular area of the business, the committee, is voting, and they're obviously going to be the majority here, but an employee staff member could also be very close to the ground, right? So their recorded vote or comments on the action should be considered. I think that would give staff, the staff would feel more involved than just a secretary at that point.
Tom, I think it's a good idea. I like it.
Yeah, I like it too, what Tom is saying, and actually I would also like to echo some of the concerns from Michael and Sarah. What I really don't like in this part is that you put a lot of work on staff for organizing purposes, and honestly, if a committee is not able to organize itself to have meetings, I'm sorry, they shouldn't exist. I'm quite drastic in that case. So if a committee is not able to schedule their own meetings, I'm sorry, that's not what staff is necessary there. They are there to help, but not to do all this kind of legwork.
Like in some areas, like for conferences, I think Laura should be an active member of that committee, have a voting right, and so on. But for other committees, that doesn't really need staff involvement. And I don't want to put all this pressure on the staff to attend meetings in the middle of the night for them, to have to schedule all the meetings. Committees can take care of that in themselves. And frankly, if a committee can't schedule a meeting and set up like a Google Hangout by themselves, they should not be a committee. Yep.
I mean, even the board is not having a staff member currently present. I mean, we are doing this ourselves, and the same should be true for the committees.
Yes, I got Hangout working by myself. Actually, no, with the help of the head of the media project, helped me dial this in. And I did not have to bug staff, and I got this done. We're all very technical. If you can't set up a calendar invite and all these basic things, then you should not be in a committee. And you probably should be employed as an IT professional for that matter.
So I don't think that I think you may be misunderstanding the rationale behind that. It has nothing to do with the ability to do it or the making sure that the committee is doing their diligence to be a committee. It has to do with ensuring that these things are happening so that the board can ensure that those things are happening. We
already have that structure in place, Josh. We have it so that once a month the committees will send a list to the community of what they're doing. That's enough for accountability. I think overburdening the staff and in certain committees, making the staff attend and track and all this is too much. It depends for the key committees, like committees and projects. I think I'm gonna err more in the direction of what you're asking for. But for other secondary committees that aren't our core areas, I'm less inclined to agree with that.
So,
shouldn't all committees be core, to be clear?
I was just going to say, I would argue that if we're creating a committee, the reason why we're creating it is because there's a core problem that needs to be solved. And any problem that needs to be solved is something that needs to have visibility by the board of directors. That doesn't mean that we have to be the ones taking the action. It doesn't mean that we have to be the ones having the conversation. But we need to have visibility into the fact that those things are happening. Yeah, if there is no representative of the board, so no staff, no board member participating in those committees, then we need to make sure that there's at least some level of insight into what's going on. And there is the problem that if a committee is taking action, taking place, but not reporting, they're doing those actions without anybody knowing about it, right? Because there's nobody there to say otherwise. So I would argue that one of two things needs to happen here. One, there needs to be staff involvement, or two, there needs to be board involvement in all those committees. And that doesn't mean that they have to have a vote. That doesn't mean that they have to be doing the stuff. It means that there has to be somebody there to make sure that those things are happening in alignment with the OWASP Code of Ethics, the policies, the procedures of the OWASP Foundation, and our strategic goals.
But I would question you that a person needs to be present, because in the end the committee needs to present its actions and communicate its actions to make them active, to make them effective. So if I do, for example, whatever, I hire like subcontractors for something that's for a company and not for the OWASP Foundation, the moment you make that public, we can say, hey, this is not what's in scope. Mm-hmm. And where I definitely disagree is that we would need staff to make sure that these meetings happen. If the people are not able to make sure that their meetings happen, again, then they are not supposed to be.
Yeah, Josh, Fabio here. The way I see this is more like they will provide the logistics or the support, but not the actual note-taking or organizing meetings or even policing the committees. Like,
yeah.
To me, it's kind of that cross the line of the staff responsibility.
Yes, I agree.
Now, for staff to facilitate things like how to set up Google Hangout, making sure people have access to accounts, making sure they have wiki access, all those logistics, right on. But the accountability is on the committee, not the staff.
Yeah. They have the power, they have the accountability. And if they are not able to have their meetings...
And if someone's requesting a wiki account and 3 weeks go by, that's a staff problem. If someone is...
Let's
like,
not go there.
It's not about...
That's not clear. Okay.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm shutting up, Jim. Sorry.
If someone is having... If a committee is struggling to get a basic scheduling done, that's a committee problem, not a staff problem. I mean that with respect to the staff. I know they're busy. I'm not trying to attack the staff, but I'm not trying to attack anyone. I'm just trying to say these are good ways to delegate responsibility for the different aspects of committee.
Josh, can you see our concerns?
I see the concern. I don't necessarily feel the same way. So a lot of this is meant to kind of lower the bar to allow the community to participate in more things. And I think that when you put some of these burden things back on the community, I think that those are things that discourage participation. I think we want to make it as easy as possible for our community members to get onto these committees, to be able to participate in the committees, to be able to take action. And anytime you start putting in things like, okay, now you need somebody to take notes, now you need somebody who has to submit reports, now you need all these other things, that's when you start getting people who say, okay, well, I don't want to participate because I don't want to do all that logistical stuff.
Let's make this, Josh, from a voting perspective. I would probably, if we go there, at the moment I have the feeling that at least Jim and Fabio are sharing my concern that in a proper organization, if you're not able to take notes for your meeting, you're not really well in a good position for that. So I would probably put this to a vote if it would come like this in, and this would I think there would be quite some voices that would not be happy with that much stuff.
And Josh, the opposite is true. I mean, I don't want to have it be like a police force watching the committee. If you have like the board reviewing all major actions and the staff participating at every meeting, that discourages people to participate because they feel like they have multiple authoritative figures watching their every move. And I want to remove that. I want to remove it so committees can operate with autonomy without being watched over their shoulder. We have to trust them. And the accountability comes where they tell the community what they're doing. There's the accountability. But in the meantime, let people be free. And with that freedom should come additional responsibility, and that's reporting their actions to the community. Boom. So having staff looking over the shoulder is disconcerting from what I've been told by many of the past committees.
An item on that as well as other committees that at least I participate in with ISC Squared, with ITJC and ILTA. Committees are organized by volunteers. Volunteers self-organize. Volunteers take the notes, keep the minutes, provide reports. Staff is operational in the back end to keep the machine running. Committees don't need a glorified secretary to be involved.
Okay, that's fine.
Now, Josh is I digress.
Yeah. Continue.
Continue on, please.
I think that's basically it. The last part is just the conclusion, basically where we talk about that by empowering volunteers to take action, that's the core to the execution of our mission. And so with the structure, that the right pieces would be in place to provide the organization with governance as well as checks and balances to ensure unbiased operation.
Now, Josh, can I lean on? This is such a fundamental change to the foundation. I want to keep going, and I think the staff, because they're behind the scenes doing the work, I really want to get their perspective added to this conversation. My request of you, Josh, if it works for you, is to walk through the committee's 2.0 document from the staff. It's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 points.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd love you to go over these and put these through the lens of what your own proposal is, and see how they all fit together. Is that acceptable if you're up for it?
Yeah, I can do that. I'll be honest. When I saw the staff proposal, I wasn't. There were several pieces in there that I thought, okay, yes, that makes sense, and there were several things where I was like, no, absolutely, that doesn't make sense. And this is coming both from a member of the board of directors as well as somebody who previously served on our committees. I think that there's, I think what it amounts to is kind of a difference in opinions in terms of why the committees were successful or unsuccessful. And so yeah, I guess we can go through them one by one. Under platform, it says OWASP has consolidated its operational platform to work on the Salesforce platform. The overhauled operational platform provide the staff with the tools to better facilitate committees, not run them, with the ability to track members, member activities, topics, and needs to be an open to all format. Additionally, this platform provides a place for committee and subcommittee engagement to occur. Now, I'm not sure exactly what part of the Salesforce platform they're talking about, but if this is the forum platform that I had seen previously, I would strongly disagree with this. I feel like the Salesforce platform is lacking in many ways. Just having gone through it, I think that for example, the Ning platform would provide a better opportunity there in terms of being able to arrange it, being able to create groups to handle certain discussions. But in the end, I somewhat digress because I don't think that platform is necessary to the committee discussion. I think that committees, as you said previously, I think that committees are kind of going to mold themselves, and it's on the personalities that are part of the committee. And so I think that we don't have to necessarily standardize on a particular platform for the committees. I think what we need to standardize is openness, transparency, and basically making sure that those actions are being taken as part of a community action, not as part of a micro. So if somebody, if a particular committee decides, yeah, we want to use the Salesforce platform, more power to them. I'm not going to argue against that. If another committee wants to use the Ning platform, more power to them. If they want to use mailing lists, more power to them. I think the idea is that regardless of the platform, they do need to standardize somewhere. It needs to be open, it needs to be transparent, and that platform needs to then be specified on the committee page as here's where everything we do gets recorded.
Josh, I agree with you 100%. I think I don't want to put. I think by forcing a platform, you actually put boundaries between the volunteer and the foundation. I want to let them use whatever platform they want. Almost every effort at OWASP to force people to use specific sets of features and tools and platforms has failed. So,
if I may add, I think that the idea would be we can offer platforms, but we don't mandate them.
Love it. I love
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we have nice. Yeah.
Drawing the parallel back to my own plan, which is what Jim had asked, I think that there's a section in there that basically says we suggest that you use the mailing list, but it's open to whatever as long as it's open. and it's documented on the wiki page. I think we leave it at that.
Do we require some kind of open platform? The other worry I have is a committee begins to operate in secret, and they have their secret cabal, and their secret handshake, and the secret tattoos, and the secret decisions. I don't want that to happen. So should we require some kind of transparency?
It is under my plan, and that's the reason why it was put into there.
Okay, I love it. I'm just making notes. I want to go and edit the staff document and put our comments in a third column, just so we've addressed it to some degree. So, by all charge on. I think we all agree about platform. That's a no-brainer. Go on. I think so.
Okay. So
before you move on with platform, I think it's important to point out that with the addition and assistance of Virtual that has background in Salesforce, as they explained to us during our group call, I think we should take consideration for what they do when they come on board. They may agree with me that Salesforce has had that could definitely be not upgraded, but leveraged from workflow as it was originally suggested, and they may actually make it some strong recommendations to move things quickly and fast. Again, whether the platform is Zoho or Salesforce or OpenCRM or any of the other ones that are out there, tools that work is what Virtual can help us with.
I love that as making those things that we offer to the community. I do not want to force that to the community, though, Tom.
No, we're talking about operationally in the back end, right? This is more of things of workflow. I mean, for instance, as you know with the board report, it's great to have a summarization of how many types of cases we're working on, what type of things are still open, what the aging is. So there's a lot of workflow stuff that these tools are useful for, like any other company.
For Office, for Office back end, platform is fundamental to keeping any organization surviving. So I agree with you there. For committees, I don't think it's as much of a relevant thing.
Yeah, I'd agree.
I'm with you, Tom. Let's
Google
go.
Docs, Google Docs wins.
Yeah, I'm with. Let's go structure.
So moving on structure, it says the 2014 committee platform proposes a tiered structure that will allow the committee to exist at a high level and have a subcommittees or task forces to be created under the umbrella of the global committee. I tend to agree with this. I think that the one issue that we have is that we don't really define the scope of the committee here in terms of what the committee was tasked originally to do. And I think that as long as there's a well-defined scope, that whatever happens within that committee is fine. So if a committee wants to appoint a task force or a subcommittee or whatever you want to call it, that's within their predefined scope, I don't see any issue with that.
I love it. Let's charge on membership.
Membership. The tiered committee structure allows a smaller group to lead or steer initiatives and subcommittees. The leadership group will commit to a one-year term, and the initiatives within the group will be task-oriented and therefore have a deadline and a defined endpoint for the participants. An open call for participants for each new task or initiative allows for individuals who are no longer interested in participation to step away. Frankly, I don't like terms. I don't like the task-oriented nature of this. I don't like the deadline-oriented nature of this by the definition. What I like is scope. I like to be able to say, this is the scope of the committee. I like to have some sort of level in terms of who should be on the committee, some sort of a bar saying, these are the people who earn the right to vote on what the committee is doing. But beyond that, I think the tasks, that deadlines, that things like that happen within the committee, and I think that it's up to the committee to dictate that, unless if there's a case where the board requests to create a committee for a specific problem to solve an issue. And I think in those cases, maybe the committee is created with a scope of this committee will last for 1 year, this committee will have has to solve this problem, and we hope to have this problem solved by X date. I think all that is handled by the scope of the committee. It doesn't necessarily need to be dictated by our overall committee structure.
Yeah, and so let the committee call the scope, let the committee call their own action items, let the committee call their own timelines, their own platforms, and let's us as a community make sure we verify that they've done what they say they're going to do, and I think we're all good.
So I got a question about the committee itself. Do you intend to have the committees appointed or elected as it pertains to our normal election process?
No, Tom, think of it like separation of government. Very often you have elected officials that come and go, but the people that do the work tend to not come and go. So I don't like the idea of elected committees. I want people to volunteer because they have the passion, not because they won a popularity contest. So I don't like the idea of committee voting structures. I think it's more they're the the people doing the work. So let any volunteer who's going to respectfully be part of a committee.
Under my proposal, anybody can participate in a committee. Anybody can take on action items or anything like that as part of the committee. The only thing that not everybody has the right to in the committee is the vote. And the vote in my proposal as reformat was that you had earned the right to vote once you had been on the committee for at least 3 months, and you earned the right to vote upon the written, I guess, approval of either a current committee member or a member of the board of directors. And so that's really the bar to be able to vote on the committee.
I think at this point, or Tom, do you want first? Otherwise, at this point, I would repeat something we discussed this morning about who's a member. Okay. So actually, Jim, Fabio, and I, we went this morning also through the question, who is on the bus? So who would be a member of the committee? You can make that either a voting member, if you want to distinguish between that, or a normal one. Personally, I'm a little bit reluctant to have that separation. So what we discussed is first, a member of the committee should be an OWASP member as kind of a baseline. Not necessarily kind of to take money. This is not about money, but this is about as a first sign of commitment. A second one would be, it would be nice that they have some kind of endorsement. In the past, we had these 3 or 5 endorsements. It might be something simpler. We definitely think the committee should vote on new members, except, of course, for people for themselves. We think that a committee should need to vote every 6 months on renewing their members, or they automatically go out. So kind of, if you want to stay in, the people actually have to actively say yes to you, to keep you. So these are some of the things we discussed this morning. I'm wondering what you think about that.
I think if those sort of things have to apply from the top down. If you set them, they start at the board level and then go down to the committee level as a cascading sort of way. But as a professional association, I think it's a good thing to be a member of the association to participate.
Yeah.
And I like the idea of, look, if you're going to vote on key operational and strategic issues of the organization, please be a member. It's not because you're trying to like grab $50 out of your pocket. We'll survive without your $50. It's demonstrating commitment that that you are saying, I am a formal member of the foundation, and it also helps filter out casual committee members who just like to jump in, vote, and jump out for things that they want to control. Be a member first. It really helps filter out.
So how does that address your honorary membership piece? I didn't hear you address that one particularly, Tobias.
Well, what do you mean with honorary membership?
Well, did you guys discuss this morning that we've gotten to the point of saying that the professional association has members and has non-members, or are we still talking about honorary members as a middle ground, which is unclear as always?
Well, as we discussed it this morning, this is basically, we didn't touch honorary members. I mean, at the moment, honorary members are members.
Yep.
So if you are a leader, you can apply for honorary membership, and you're a member of OWASP, which would, in this case, we are only asking, are you a member or not whether you have paid for it.
Okay, so to Jim's point then, so it's not about, we all agree it's never about the money, right? But it is about the commitment. So
yes.
To be clear, you're saying that as a committee member, you don't need to be a member. You could be a member, or you could be an honorary member, which by default is not a member, right? I mean, there's two different things.
An honorary member has all the rights of a normal OWASP member, including votes, in my understanding. Tom.
Yes.
To a point. Look at the membership roster, guys. There's only 2,400 people that can call themselves members of the association. It's only 2,400. So be clear about the number.
Yes.
So I'm going to object here to what you're saying, Tom. I do feel like honorary members are members, and the reason why I say that is while they may not have put in the $50 as their token, I'm contributing to the foundation, they put in far more valuable time. to the foundation. I think that in my opinion, personally, I would rather have the time that they're putting into the foundation than their $50 any day, every day of the week.
I agree.
I don't think anybody disputes that. I'm just making a clear statement about what you guys said earlier, was that you said you can't be on a committee unless you've put some skin in the game and you've actually been a member of the association. It's not about your $50. I think that's how it was stated.
Yeah, but
and I'm trying to clarify that statement. So is it?
Tom, to clarify, today, in my understanding, is an honorary member is normal member. He will be on the membership roster. Okay, he is in the membership list. It's not only the paid; it's all the members are in the membership list. The paid ones and the honorary ones equally.
Yeah. Okay. Again, I think maybe this is you guys are missing the point. I'm rewinding what you all just were saying, which was that in order to be on a committee, you must be a member, and you must go ahead and have some skin in the game that was relative to the $50. So we're just making sure for the record that that's not what we're saying. We're saying that if you're on the membership list, then you're able to be on a committee. That's what you're saying, guys.
Exactly.
Yes.
Okay.
And as a secondary note, an honorary member equals a member. Those are
the same.
Those are the same.
They both was the word member. So let's not. Yeah.
So I'm gonna amend this slightly. I'm gonna say I agree in terms of a voting member of the committee that makes sense. In terms of participation in the committee, I don't think that there's a bar there. I think that anybody in the community, and this could be a member, a non-member, somebody from like a good example, the projects. Let's say we start a projects committee. I would see Swamp, the group that we've started talking with about testing and things like that. I would see them playing an active role in the projects committee. Now, would I see them having a vote? Maybe, maybe not. But I definitely see them wanting to be involved in some of those discussions, and we shouldn't prohibit them from being involved just because they're not an OWASP member.
Josh, maybe to build on your idea, would this be something like there are committee members and guests?
I mean, I guess you could see it that way. I think the idea is that you have voting members of the committee and you have other members of the committee, and I don't know. I think you're arguing semantics at that point. Whether you call them a guest or a non-voting member or whatever. I think that's irrelevant. And I think the idea is that in order to have a vote in the committee, these are the things that you need to have. And so I agree that a member of committee should be a member of OWASP. I like that. I agree that there should be some kind of endorsement. I like that. I'm happy I have a committee vote on new members. That was kind of the idea behind either having the board or the current committee member be that endorsement, is it kind of did a 2-for-1 between those 2 points. And then the committee vote every 6 months on keeping members or they're automatically ousted. Personally, I would think that 6 months is probably a little bit short, but I'm cool with that too. So
I agree.
Okay. I mean, basically, the committee re-elects every 6 months is the same as you have to sign up every 6 months. It's just a little bit stronger.
Yep.
All right, charge on.
Okay. All right, so we talked about membership. Next one is leadership. A key core committee group driving initiatives with variable lengths will allow the global community to participate in the activities that interest them for the length of time that may require. I mean, I can't argue with that. I don't know what that has to do with leadership necessarily, but it seems like it's basically saying that a committee will be created, that members of the global community are allowed to participate for whatever the scope is of that committee. So
what do you? Yeah, charge on. I think I'm with you.
Okay. Committee purpose. The committee should be assigned not to a broad area of operations, but to the strategic goals as set by the board. By collaborating as a global community with the opportunity to define a roadmap for a goal, will allow for the committee members to be successful to see progress. I think that this is well in line with kind of the scoping statements and the oversight, the accountability piece that I was talking with in my plan, and I tend to agree with that. So strategic goals, that's basically a scoping statement. Any reason to stick on that?
No, charge on.
Okay. Interaction. The core leadership group will work as one unit. Each leader will choose a particular goal, and the leaders will monitor each other and interact on a regular basis to develop the initiatives and task force groups.
And I think the interaction you're suggesting, Josh, is more where when a committee does something, they're going to send that to the community for consideration and review and accountability. And that interaction tends to happen organically in our organization as well.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah, I think you just hit the nail on the head there.
All right, John.
Okay. Board involvement. The committee should not be managed by the board of directors. The board needs to show trust and encouragement for the community to experiment and to be successful. Board members cannot participate as core committee members, but can provide input and participate in any of the task force initiatives as a community member. So this is the area where I very strongly, I agree with part and I disagree with the others. I agree that the committee should not be managed by the board of directors. I agree that we should show trust and encouragement in the community to experiment and to be successful. I do not agree that board members cannot participate as core committee members. I think the thing to realize here is that pretty much every single one of the members of the board of directors started from the point of, I'm a volunteer. I'm contributing to this community in some way, shape, or form, whether it be through projects, whether it be through chapters. And I think that the passion is there to want to contribute to these committees. My original kind of thoughts on this was that the board should be required to take an active role in a committee. You should have a passion. You should have a desire to improve some area of OWASP, whether it be chapters or projects or something. I understand that some people have objections to that. I'm fine with that. But I certainly do not feel like boards should be prohibited from participating in the committee.
I agree. But if we're going to allow board members to be on committees, we really have to make it more clear that the board member is not special in that point. Everyone we talk to thinks that the board has this like specialized power over areas of OWASP that I don't believe we have. And I think maybe we need to do better in our marketing of the board to make it clear that we're just volunteers as well, that what we do is relatively transparent, and that staff and other leaders have more power than even the board does in some respects. So I'm not sure how to verbalize that accurately, but if we're going to let board members on committee, we got to go out of our way to make that message clear.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're serving the committee as just another member of the community. It is not as an oversight role. It is not as you're going to make decisions. But let's be honest, at the end of the day, if the committee is doing something where the board member feels like it's contrary to what the board should be doing, it's their fiduciary responsibility to report that back to the rest of the board and to take action. So there is some level of you are serving two roles, and you have to acknowledge that. But that doesn't mean that you have to push things on the committee. It doesn't mean that you have to, whatever. I mean, you do have two hats on when you're on that committee.
And all the rules of behavior and all that on committees, the board has to follow that as well. The board is not special. You are not a flower.
Fabio?
Yes, in terms of the role of the board, what about each board member as a champion of one of these committees, rather than an active because it's all about the perception.
As a sponsor.
Or as a sponsor. Because the fact that we as board members, we get in and, we get our hands dirty and start shaping the committee, most of the volunteers or other, members of the committee will just respect that. They will not argue about it. They will just think that you as an authority, as a board member, are, giving the direction of the committee. And I think we need to empower the community to say, listen, you guys, go ahead and do your thing. And we are here just to support your view of things, but not to shape that, that vision.
Well, I mean, it's pretty clear, and I think we should make so as we all know, right, we're not a board unless we're together as a quorum to make a decision as a board. So when this meeting breaks, you're an individual. Whatever you say is your own statements, right? So that's pretty clear, and that's simply board 101 understanding. So we're not communicating that we operate like any other board of directors, well, that's a bigger problem because, again, nobody has any superpowers, right? It's a quorum issue. So I don't know why we have this perceived problem because, like any board, that's how they operate.
Tom,
I think unclear.
Tom, I think that's an absolutely excellent point, and that's how we should be messaging the community that a board individual member has two hats. When you're participating in some project or committee by yourself, you are an individual volunteer for the foundation. When you're voting when you have a quorum and you're voting on issues, then you're acting as a board member. And I think that's a really good way to message that separation. And I really like the conciseness in that idea a lot, Tom.
Okay, well, that's, I mean, and we can reference, hundreds of items that says what a board is, starting with Wikipedia. But exactly. that's the plain Jane sort of conversation here, guys, right? It's so I think it's a no-brainer. I don't know what the discussion is about.
That was just the language I've been looking for to help explain to the community what the board member's role is and what it's not. That's a really concise way of saying it. It's really straightforward. I like it, Tom.
Well, then perhaps you should adopt it to the bylaws then to make it very clear. So when someone reads the organization's charter as it pertains to what the bylaws do for appointed board members or elected board members, that it's very, very clear. It should be in a bylaw.
This is Tobias. I definitely agree with you, Tom, on the role. I mean, that's kind of really Board 101 obvious. I think the challenge that we face as an organization is this perception of people. And instead of adding something to the bylaws, which is, I think, from a bylaw perspective, obvious anyway, it might be useful to rather add something to the committee description and say that any board members who attend a committee attend these as simple, normal volunteers of the community. Period.
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. Maybe that helps.
Yeah, well, and also to address to Fabio's point earlier, what you guys may not have realized because you weren't on the board when this was happening, was that we were rotating board members to different committees on a 3-month basis to allow them to sort of jump in, help out, see what's going on, and kind of rotate so that the board members that are the biggest volunteers of this organization, right, that they are able to go ahead and help out and kind of spin up some effort. That didn't really work out well. That's why it went away. But there was a concept there about having a relationship with the committee. I think this model is better, and if you need to clarify it in the mission, feel free. It is Board 101 stuff. People should not be concerned about someone's role, especially when they're not in a capacity to make a role or make a statement that they can't do.
Okay.
I like
so it sounds like we all kind of agree there that the board, that an individual board member should feel free to be involved in a committee.
And I think a caveat is the board needs to do a little bit better marketing and clarifying what an individual board member's role is and what it's not. I don't think we've done even though it's in Wikipedia, Tom, we haven't done a good job of putting that out there. And I think if we're going to allow board members on committees, which we should also, on the other side of that coin, clarify the message that you just said, Tom. I think that's really clean. It'll help a lot of people be a little bit less afraid or.
Well, then you have to simply underline that with the all persons, especially board members, have to adhere to some professionalism and not have issues with individuals on the committee. Then I think we're good.
I agree 100%.
Okay.
Sorry for bringing one more question up. I remember there was the proposal from Fabio that board members should maybe sponsor or champion or kind of work in that. Is that kind of in contradiction with what we just said, or?
Yeah, it is.
Here's the other thing. If a committee wants a board member to sit on that committee, I think leave it up to the committee. If a committee wants a board champion, then by all means, if there's a board member who has that time or interest, let them do it. If a committee would prefer not to have that, I think that, nope, that's tricky too. Can't do that. It's one way or the other. Yeah, I got you.
Actually, let's table that for later. I think let's go without it. Let's go with as we discussed, and maybe we find a way how we can make
the easiest way to solve that is if you are serving on the board of directors for the foundation, you cannot be the chair of the committee or the primary person of the committee. Like, that's a good way to buffer it, right? So therefore, the person in charge of the committee would not be a duplicate individual. Does that make sense?
But are we talking that now there is a chair for each committee?
No, Well, no, we said before that there would not be a chair, but obviously there's going to be a committee lead or a committee primary person or the main guy sort of trying to help organize stuff. That always happens, right? I think you just have to be careful that you don't want to have, if you guys are concerned, you might want to just spell that out and say, it's probably not in the best interest of the committee to have an active board member to be the lead or whatever word you want to use.
I fully agree with that.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Okay. Moving on. Board approval. Proposals brought forward from the committee should be voted upon by the community or community leadership. The community decision should be considered valid. Implementing a process for a trial period of 6 months to a year would be sufficient to determine if it was beneficial for the organization. This also reinstates the sense of ownership of the community has in the organization. So again, I think that the idea here is that it's not the community necessarily that is making the decisions, it's the committee, and I think we need to make somewhat of a distinction there. But I agree that the committee votes should be decided within the committee, that we've already kind of scoped out who the voting members of the committee are, and as long as that holds true, I think that this is dead on. That those people who are making the votes, their decision should be valid. Now, I do think that there needs to be a process, and we kind of talked about this earlier in my document, for if there's a problem, that the decision can be overruled by the board, but I think it needs to be very public in terms of why that is. I think it needs to be publicly discussed, and I think that the reason needs to be one of the committee either violating its scope, violating its budget, signing a contract that shouldn't have been signing. There has to be some sort of issue there, not in line with the strategic vision, not in line with the code of ethics, whatever the case may be. It needs to be very, very specific in terms of what that violation is and the reason for overturning that vote. And I think that there's a fine line here. I think that we shouldn't be taking that action. I mean, ideally, we should never be taking that action. The committee should be able to do what they need to within that scope. But I do think that there needs to be that kind of series of checks and balances to ensure that if a committee is abusing its power, that can be checked.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like, comparing it with the previous committee kind of structure, what we're saying here is that there is an implicit approval of, the committee and their actions, and if there is a, change of direction that the board doesn't fully support, then that we could go in and veto that decision, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So Josh, do you support, or does the rest of the team support in this document for clarity? Because obviously people need to read it and digest it. But A, there should be 1 or 2 abuse cases as an example just so people can understand what we're talking about. And again, an abuse case would be probably the best thing here. And then the second piece is trying to, are you going to float this out for comment and then take that feedback? And then lastly, we need to establish a workflow for a complaint, right? So we've talked about several times how if the community doesn't like something that the committee is working on, we have to define what that workflow is for filing a complaint, right? So therefore, it can be known. Otherwise, the leaders list becomes littered with, I don't like this.
Mm-hmm. So that's kind of the problem that I had with this proposal is that the staff proposal didn't address a lot of those more logistical kind of issues, and that's why I wrote my own document around that. I think that it does handle the complaint process. It talks about the complaint being brought on the public leaders list, the public discussion, and followed by the board vote in terms of what happens there. I think it handles a lot of those more logistical concerns. Sorry, you put 3 different questions out there, and I didn't.
Sorry. Yeah.
My mind didn't capture all of them.
So the first one I think you answered, which is the complaint process is defined. The second one was in the document to spell out an abuse case, so a ridiculous abuse case, so people can measure against something, right? So that way they can be very clear as to what the spirit of the document is, so that we know it can't possibly accomplish everything, but we should certainly have a spirit so people can refer to it and say, yeah, this is kind of one of those cases.
Mm-hmm. So in terms of the abuse case, I mean, I think the obvious abuse cases here are going to be you know, the code of ethics violation, right? If the committee is doing something where they take money from the foundation and funnel it off to, you know, I don't know, the Christian youth ministry or something like that, right? You know, that's a very obvious area where it has nothing to do with the OWASP mission. It's you know, that is a definite issue. I think we could all agree that has nothing to do with what a committee should be doing, what OWASP should be doing. And so, you know, maybe that's a potential abuse case. Now, whether we need to spell that out or not, yeah, I don't know. I think that what we would spell out would be extremes that I think most people would feel like shouldn't be there anyways. I think we just need to define, in terms of the committee structure, I think we need to define the things that are or are not being judged here. And I think that, again, if you look at my document, I've spelled out the scope of the committee, the code of ethics, the mission statement, the strategic goals. Those are the things that we're basically evaluating to make sure that the committee's actions are in line with expectations.
Very good. Thank you.
Okay.
I feel we've addressed this really well, Josh. This seems like reasonable feedback on all of this as well.
But
Yeah.
to add, I think the idea from Tom to add these examples into the document is a good idea. So maybe in an appendix, have 3 example cases. Hey, this should not happen, and this would probably then happen. Might be useful.
And again, you can go historical, right? We can take a couple of things that have happened during this term of office, last 2 years, or in the past, and use them as examples. I think we still had that issue happening down in Latin America with the chapter. So if the chapter's committee would say, hey, no problem, let that go forward, that would be an example, perhaps, that we would say, no. You know, it's very clear that we don't charge for meetings. Like, there needs to be some sort of an abuse case to measure against. I think that provides guidance for the committee so that at least they have an idea as to what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Again, no one's reading 50-page documents, guys.
Yeah, absolutely. I like it. Actually, I have, maybe if I may at this point ask a question. One of the things that we just discussed is what kind of committees would we actually have? I mean, now we talked about the framework, but I'm wondering what would be committees that we would see?
So I pointed out a few of them. In my document,
Yes.
I pointed out a few that I kind of envisioned as being rather obvious, right? I think we could all agree that having something around the chapters would make sense. You know, having somebody to help guide the chapters, rewrite the chapter leader handbook, things like that. And so if we had a volunteer that wanted to step up and run that, I think that makes sense. I think that projects is a definite area, and I know that Dennis and Johanna had said that they would like to move forward with the projects one, and I think that as soon as possible, once we have the committee structure outlined, after this discussion, I think that we should greenlight that and let them push forward with that since there's an active interest there. I could see an area of governance. We have a governance mailing list. We probably should have a governance committee where, questions of, can we still claim to be open when we ban a member, right? That's an issue of governance. So I think that some of those things, maybe discussions of bylaws amendments. So we just talked earlier about adding something to the bylaws about the role of the board. That's a governance discussion. I think that those were the key areas that I had outlined. Let me look through here.
I have 2 more names on the list that we discussed. One was education, interaction with universities, and a second one was basically as a contact point for industry. That was kind of what we had in the past. But I'm really open to feedback on these.
So conferences was another one. That's one that I outlined that I missed. And I think that that could probably be debated at this point, whether a conferences committee is actually necessary. I think Laura's been doing an excellent job in terms of kind of organizing that, and I think that you could probably say that the individual conference planning team is actually its own committee, if you will, that's empowered within the scope of that conference.
Yeah, we have a temporary committee for every conference that is time sensitive based on that conference life cycle. That's plenty, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So in terms of education committee and the industry committee, you know, what I would say is I think those might make sense. I think the real challenge is in finding a leader who wants to push that as an initiative. And so I think that's kind of the idea here with the committee structure is the old committee structure, one of the reasons why it failed is we created artificial committees that didn't have the motivation behind them. It didn't have the passion behind them. And when you don't have the passion, it's doomed to failure. So I think that we need to take a step back. I think we need to outline the process of creating a committee, the empowerment behind the committee, what it means to do that. And then I think if you feel like the education committee is something that you know, that we should support, write up a scope for it, throw it out in the community, and say who wants to push this. And if there's somebody who feels passionate about it, then let's move with it. If there's not, I don't think we should create a committee where a committee doesn't exist. And I think
I'm fully with you.
I think that's where the board power ends and the community power begins, is if the community wants to empower themselves to take action for a specific topic, I think we give them the ability to take action for that topic. I think that where they don't want to be empowered, where they don't have the desire to do that, I think that that's where the board kind of, for lack of any other governing body, that's where we take over.
I fully agree.
Yep,
I fully agree,
Josh.
If there is no driving force, then there is no committee. And I think one of the, I see this actually as an opportunity right now, not to make the mistake and kind of just set up the committees again as they were before, but to only set up committees where we really need them. So where we have people driving them. And actually potentially that might include the chapter part.
Also, I think I totally like the idea that was stated about having them crowdsourced. But remember the one thing, especially when it comes to dialect, language, and regionalization, right? In many cases, you use a committee like education or industry just as a blanket word. That word needs to also be broken down into a regionalized sort of committee as well, because the folks that are handling the Latin America committees, they may be more focused with the industry in that particular region, speak native language. We have to be very careful about having a committee leader who's global and have no local experiences.
Yep. Okay, so we will basically, I mean, this was more like to get a feeling from you. I mean, we will most likely see what kind of proposals are coming in, and then based on that, set up the committees. Is that what I hear?
Yes.
Okay.
And perhaps if we're going to put, once this gets ratified and pushed out to the blog as a statement of what we're doing moving forward, perhaps this is one of those areas where it's a great opportunity to link into like the OWASP initiatives and say, hey, if you'd like to create a regional committee or a global committee, provide this sort of data. Like you can provide people as they read the document, they can kind of jump into the conversation and be part of the solution, not part of the crowd, right? Be part of the solution.
Maybe one thing that I noticed. Like a year ago when there was at some point the committees and the initiatives living at the same time, a beauty I can see in that is actually them working together. So you could have a committee identifying stuff that should be done and then creating initiatives to do these specific individual tasks and bringing in people for that specific task.
Yep, you're spot on.
Yeah, I think they're one and the same. I think it's a vocabulary process, and I think it's a workflow issue. I think that the current initiatives, as is, with some rewording on the page, allow us to kind of make things happen. And when a committee has to go ahead and put things forth as an initiative or as an agreed upon effort, then we should use the existing infrastructure for initiatives as a process. There's a lot of stuff there that many may not be aware of.
Yeah, I'm aware of initiative definition. I think the distinguishing factor is an initiative is a time-finite project with one goal. So while a committee may have separate objectives, so I can see a committee has several initiatives coming out of it.
Where a task is a single item.
Yes.
I like that. I like that.
And the measurement you keep going back to, and the reporting and the metrics and all that other stuff, that's where you have to leverage the existing infrastructure for initiatives to have that tracking.
Yeah, exactly. The member nation, and I've seen it working. I actually watched a demo with Joanna and Kate. We could set up the committees within member nation, and then assign tasks or initiatives to each one of those committees. So there is a tracking of each one of those activities and the activities of the overall committees, which I think would be great to have that visibility. And it ties with Salesforce as well.
So, I think whatever tools are there are great, but I think that we also should perhaps have a conversation about perks and rewards, right? For any of you who have worked with Google or any other cool companies that are fun to work with, any of the volunteer efforts that we're going to get out of our community, the elephant in the room is what's in it for them. So we know that spending money on initiatives isn't probably going to happen, but we should certainly go ahead and identify perks and rewards. I think it was several members that have had great suggestions about, you put in X amount of efforts or time, you maybe get access to a conference or a training or other things like that. The perk reward system, we need to scrutinize and look at that a little bit, because all of this stuff is awesome, but the real question is someone sitting down reading this saying, why would I ever want to do this? Like, there needs to be some sort of motivation to be involved, more than just more than just saying it's a good thing to do.
Go ahead, Tom. I'm sorry. Finish that thought again. I apologize.
I would say more than just it's a good thing to do. Charity is awesome, but it's also incentivizing when you have lots of people moving in the same direction for common rewards that are useful. So a point system is useful. Gamification is useful. I mean, we have to kind of figure out how to take this process we want to put out there and actually make it fun.
Tom, the beauty about Member Nation is that it allows that gamification that you're talking about. You could kind of highlight top contributors. You could give them badges. You could give them, awards. So it all goes back to that, suggestion of having the back-end infrastructure working together. And I think Member Nation could help a lot in this regard.
And I think a lot of people, they volunteer, they want to feel good about themselves. They want to contribute something positive to the community. So the more we can make OWASP a safe place to contribute, regardless of gamification of the things, then we're going to really facilitate making a environment that makes people want to volunteer. And I think, to some degree, OWASP has become a unsafe place because of all the, the brutality happening on leaders list. So
I want to echo that statement, Jim. I put a comment out on the leaders list a while back about going from a community of kind of the naysayers to the community of doers, and I feel like it's something we're all guilty of. But I think moving from right now, where anytime somebody has an idea, the first thing that we all do is try and jump in and try and say, no, you shouldn't do this, or you should do it this way instead, or whatever. Realize that we're all here for the same purpose. We're all trying to solve the challenges of application security. And if somebody has an idea, maybe it's not the best idea. Maybe there are ways that we can make it better, right? But I don't think we need to start out with the no, we shouldn't do that. It's like, yeah, that's a fantastic idea. What if I jumped in and I helped with this aspect of it? And I think we need to say more yes and a lot less of no. I don't think so.
And Josh, keep in mind that, we're an open community of primarily security pen testers and hackers, and we're expected, and we need to encourage a safe place for that community. That's an extraordinary challenge, because many of the people in our community, their mindset is, how can I find the tiniest flaw in any system? So yep. This is an incredibly challenging goal. I don't think we'll ever actually meet that goal, but we got to constantly be trying and pushing in that direction, and on an individual scale as well as on a global scale. So this is not an easy thing to do,
guys.
It's definitely a cultural issue, and I think that we need to work towards changing that. And I think it starts with us as the board of directors. I know I'm personally guilty of it, from being the one who said, no, I don't think we should do this, or hell, even in the staff committee proposal, the first thing that I did is I shot through it and shot down individual pieces of that. And maybe it's better to take the approach of going through it and saying, I like this idea, can I help draft this in terms of a larger plan rather than just shooting it down outright.
Guys,
And that's what I try to do.
Guys, if I may, as secretary of the board, kind of raise the question. We have a certain timeline for Jim and Fabio to leave. Whether there are other topics on the agenda you want to discuss, otherwise I'm fine with us continuing this point. I was just kind of minding the time if there are other things you want to discuss before we run out of time. Sorry for kind of jumping in there. So I'm open for both parts. Okay, it's up to you.
I think that we can kill this discussion if we're ready to move on. I think I have some feedback that I'm going to use to tweak my proposal.
Yeah.
I think that we can all kind of agree that my proposal is so the staff proposal is more bullet point ideas. I think that my proposal is more fleshed out in terms of the structure, and I'll do my best to kind of incorporate some of these pieces as well as what we've discussed into my proposal.
Yes,
if that makes sense.
Yes, your proposal shall be the draft and incorporate what we've seen, and I think they are in line with each other quite a bit.
I really like us to run this carefully by at least GK and Kate. I want to make all of their concerns, because they have a very different perspective on the foundation than we do. I want to make sure all their concerns are very carefully addressed. So as much as we can collaborate with them on this, the better, Josh.
Absolutely. To your point, Jim, I sent both GK and Kate a note, letting them know that this document was out there, letting them know that I'd like their feedback on it. With the AppSec EU conference, both of them were tied up with activities on, as far as the conference goes. And I know at least Kate came back and said, hey, I'd like to have the opportunity to review this. Yes, I do have some comments, but I'd like to be able to do that after the conference. So I'd like to give them that opportunity.
I love it.
I might suggest you go one step further there as a board, and we'll make this recommendation to Michael to tell the staff to do this, that since we use Google Docs and since it can be in Google Docs and since everybody can put comments on it, that we request all staff members to read and acknowledge the document and basically put comments in as appropriate so that we can get all of the staff involved before we start engaging our virtual team, which is starting on the 7th. Is that correct?
Yep, July 7th.
So we should probably put a deadline is that we want all staff to review and comment and acknowledge before, let's say, the 6th maybe, or some sort of arbitrary date, because we would prefer to have that without influence of the third-party organization that we're hiring.
Love it.
I fully agree. The only thing I would like to see is I would like to see this in a relatively stable stage before we push it on the desk of our staff, because I don't want them to have to review this document too often.
But it's okay
you want
to have their input. No, I think we could leave it there, open to everyone.
Open. Yes. It's more like I'm asking them. Am I forcing it?
No, it's actually forcing it. It's actually making it a job request and requirement to review the document when it's in draft form and place your comments on the document using Google Docs. That's something we can ask people to do.
The verbiage that I want to use is more along the lines of to implore the staff to participate in the building of this new mechanism. It's going to radically affect all of us. So I don't want to force their hand. I want them to want to collaborate with us and the community to build this out. Name game, but I think it's important.
And I don't want them to feel like me drafting the proposal is a mark against what they put out there. In fact, their piece was actually the catalyst for creating what I did. I just saw that it needed to be a more thought out, well-structured idea, and there were a couple little areas where I thought, like the board participation, for example, I thought that we needed to kind of tailor that. But other than that, I definitely want to encourage staff participation in the process, and then community involvement as well. If there's members of the community who have feedback on this, let's get that feedback now. And then we'll put out a formal, send it to the leaders list. Hey, what do you guys think on this? So.
Okay, so basically you will incorporate the the discussions we had here today. Yep. I will also send, we have the minutes, so there are some more comments, and after you incorporate that, you will ask feedback from the staff and the community. Is that accurate?
That's accurate.
Good. Are you okay to move on? We have actually several more points more than we have time for. So we kind of have to arbitrage a little bit, but I think it was very valuable that we talk about committees 2.0 because I think that's the most important point on our agenda. So it's time well spent. So we have one point kind of how do we want to handle the project manager support administration function for the future. Another one might be to talk about project summits. Another one might be to talk about some budget questions, but as Sarah is not here, that's probably not so helpful. We have ethical challenges. Which of these topics would you like to address in the next 20-25 minutes?
Let's start off with the biggest one, I think, which is ethics. That's should be the highest priority of our organization.
Okay, I'm fine with that. Other people in favor?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so we take that one. Maybe, Tom, do you want to open that?
I didn't put it on the list. I have no context as to what it's about.
Okay, so who put it there? Okay.
Owen did.
Owen did. Okay, and Owen doesn't dial in. I think one of the ideas is to set up an ethical committee to take some of the burden away from our compliance officer. I think the kind of if you followed recent discussions on the leader list and kind of actions happening there, there's a lot of work kind of on his desk, and it feels like that's maybe too much for one person.
I agree. And just to protect Martin as well, when there's an when there is an ethical issue, rather than saying Martin Knobloch said this, I want it to be the ethical committee came to this conclusion. It really helps protect the members of that committee. It shouldn't just be one person making these calls. It should be more of a group decision. So I think an ethical committee will help deal with these difficult issues more than just one compliance officer will.
To be clear, the ethics committee would be the role fulfilling the compliance officer role as it is today. Is that correct?
No, I don't see that. I see that the committee would be a committee that would deal with the issues as stated. The officer would be the appointed position that would actually make that would help govern the committee. So that would almost be a committee chair, if you will.
The ethics committee chair. Yeah, makes sense. And that's renewable on a, say, yearly basis, same as the compliance officer role.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, it has to be some accountability and responsibility assigned to an individual that's going to pass judgment on others, right? That's a sort of a process issue. And hiding behind the word committee is not a good one at that point.
The ultimate responsibility is on the board, because I think like the committee will come up with a conclusion or recommendation, and then the board will decide on that. So that the accountability is part of the board duty.
Yeah.
So we just spent the last 2 hours talking about committee structure, and it sounds like this conversation is moving towards let's create a new committee and let's found it in this way and that. What I would say is let's create a scope for what we'd like this committee to handle, and let's throw it out there and solicit for volunteers for this committee. I don't think that the discussion needs to go much beyond that at this point.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So we also should put a timeline on that, right? So I mean, that should be something that we do this month as part of this document.
Yeah, and you can scope it that way, right? I mean, it's the committee is scoped to last for this long. We need this particular problem solved, and heck, it could be we don't have a standing committee for that. We create a committee for a specific ethical concern or a specific problem to address, and we address it. And the committee is dynamic.
Well, there's one thing to this. If, for example, you investigate a specific ethical question, I mean a specific ethical violation, what you don't want is that people join that after it has been published. Because basically what you want is you want people to be in it before the issue has been raised, because that gives them an impartial view. I mean, if you basically open the community for members after the issue has been raised, then you will have that problem.
That's true. And in that sense, that should be how the committee is scoped, right? Maybe in order to address an issue, somebody on the committee has to have been, part of it for a certain period of time, so that they have the context or the background there. But that's all part of the scoping statement for the committee.
Okay. I agree.
And another important part there, as I said before, is regionalization, right? Language, dialect, culture. That's where ethics committee needs to have diversity.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Who's gonna take this action item?
So I think we should. I mean, I'll be happy to take it, and I'll grab Owen and have him help me scope it because it's his item on the agenda, and he's not on the call.
Okay, I add you two, Tom and Owen, scope
Yep.
of ethics committee. And I mean, you can always loop other people in. Good. Well, next one. Which one do you like? Talking about project administrator, project summits, project review. Yeah.
So do we have the people who put that on the call? I think that would be the next question, because I think Owen put a few of those on the list.
Okay, I can say I put, for example, on that I think we need a project supporter. So I mean, we had a project manager in the past, and we don't have that role filled now. But I really believe we need to refill that kind of not to refill that position, but I think we need someone to help with the project organization.
Yeah.
And the vocabulary there would be the program manager is what we had prior that helped manage the program relative to projects, not individual projects, right? That was one of our vocabulary definition issues.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
I don't like that term. I rather see it something like a project administrator, facilitator, supporter, whatever, just not use the word manager.
Yes, I agree.
But are we in agreement that we should fill a position for that purpose rather soon?
I think we all agree that we should. I think the only question at this point is defining the scope of that position, defining what exactly we expect that to do. I think that we can all kind of agree that it's going to be slightly different than the role that Samantha was fulfilling. But I think that we need to define exactly what that means. And so I think my proposal here would be that somebody take on the task of defining what that new position is and then bringing that to the board for approval before we go and seek candidates for that position. I think we all agree that it needs to be filled. I think we all agree that somebody needs to help there. I think the real question is what exactly does that mean? And that would probably be working hand in hand with Sarah in order to define that.
Yeah, I definitely see Sarah as the key person and us as the board then working with that. But I can take that kind of as an item first if you want, unless there's another volunteer.
Yeah, so I have a very, I agree with Josh to a point. I think that I'm very interested to see what happens with our virtual assessment of our business and the recommendations that they come back with in August 15th and have sort of the preliminary review of what's happening and their recommendations. So as part of that, I agree that the backfill may be needed, but I think it's appropriate to wait until we have input from our third party that's worked with many other organizations, including ones that have many projects.
I think that's a good idea.
How long do you think we would need for that?
Sorry,
they ramp up in like a week. So. Go ahead, Tom. Sorry.
Yeah, so I think a week's too short, but I think that the first milestone as part of the, once they hit the ground, we should try to ask for before the next board meeting, which is way too far away. That's 3 months away. We would like to have something by, like, let's say the end of August, right? So we assume, and what we've been told, is that they're going to start off by doing conversations with each of the employees and make sure they understand the full scope of those persons' roles and how the current workflow in the organization works, right? They have to get up to speed. So before we can get a recommendation, particularly around projects, I think that it behoove us to say August, end of August would be appropriate as an item for feedback from a third party.
So I'm going to step in here real quick. I'm going to assume that you guys earlier on the meeting discussed what Sarah had put out there in terms of her the board call and the objectives and all that stuff. There was a section in there where she talked about Samantha's responsibilities and how they would fall. And the one thing that I think that is really important to note here is that Samantha's responsibilities, the vast majority of them, are going to be unhandled going forward. There was not anybody who was assigned to them. Grants and whatnot, where Sarah said she would take them on, specific, creating projects and things like that, I think is going into the normal system for staff to handle.
Tom, mute yourself, sir.
That's Josh, not Tom. Say again.
No, it's not me. Hang on. All right, I've muted Tom. Staff would then handle kind of the trouble ticket aspect of it, but any sort of proactive moving forward in terms of the project's area would not be handled. So I'm thinking that moving a decision to late August is probably not the right move here. I think that if we all kind of agree that there should be somebody around to handle projects, that I don't think that we should wait on virtual for that we should currently work on the scope of what that means and then start seeking candidates to fill that position.
Would you prefer to move an existing staff member into that role because they have more context, and then hire a backfill for an existing staff member, than bringing in somebody brand new from the street?
I wouldn't say that I particularly have that preference. I think that if there's a current staff member who would like to fill that position, that's certainly something that we should be willing to talk about. But I think that we need to define the scope of that position first, then put it out there to see if anybody's interested in it, and then we can figure out what to do from there. If there's a staff member that says, I want to move from this particular focal area to that one, then I think that we can certainly have that discussion. But I don't think that at present that's the discussion to have. I think right now the discussion is, what is the scope of that position and what is the time frame in order to fill it, and I don't think that waiting until August is appropriate in this particular case.
And let's face it, if you move one staff member into another area, that leaves the previous area vulnerable and open. So I'm definitely open for allowing a staff member to move into this if they want to. But I think even then we would need to hire a replacement there, because our staff is working very hard, and I think they need enough hands on deck.
I think, Josh, are you referring to our intern?
I'm sorry?
Are you referring to the intern?
I'm not referring to anybody. We have so when Samantha left, we left a gap in our projects area. What I'm saying is that I think we all kind of agree that the scope of that role needs to change slightly. I think that somebody on the board needs to take on the task of trying to redefine that, along with Sarah, obviously. And then I think once that's redefined, I don't think that we can wait until August in order to hire a new person. I think we need to look at probably scoping within the next 1 to 2 weeks, and then putting out a formal call, within that time frame.
Agreed. The thing is, for example, and now that Samantha is not there anymore, and Kate, our intern, her contract is about to expire in July. I think we're gonna leave this, decision until August, because then there's going to be a gap of, between hiring process and everything that will not have any kind of.
I suggest a month-to-month renewal of that until we have virtual involved.
Yeah, or you guys are missing the other point. Or expand the scope and have virtual take this on. That's simple.
Yeah, that's another area. What were you suggesting there, Tom? Because I saw your note. Would they be able to fulfill this role, like as a project facilitator?
Well, I think Josh's point is should be agreed upon, and we should maybe table it. But we need to define and write up the summarization as to what we believe it needs to be. That will come from the current executive director, reviewed by the board, and added to, and then finalized. And then at that point, if virtual or anybody else can meet those requirements, then we can go ahead and execute that. But at this point, we need to have a definition of what we're trying to do before we can start putting somebody in that role. I agree.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. So the action item will for us to be to define, actually for Sarah to define with someone from us what that role shall be, and then we kind of look how we can fill it.
Well, I think the nice part about this sort of a task force effort is good because we've had a lot of vocal people around projects in the last 90 days. So we might be able to herd them and say, hey, you guys want to help do a task force on this and share a Google Doc and write up a job description and then have everybody be done with it. I think it's simple. I think we can get many people, Johanna, Dennis, and anybody else that wants to put in their 2 cents, write up a description. Let's go ahead and float it by. And then let's push it out and say, hey, this is what we're trying to fill. If virtual can fill it, great. If we can fill it with an intern that wants to become a full-timer, great. If we can fill it with other staff member, great. Just again, it has to be defined.
Yeah. Yes, I fully agree. Mm-hmm. And the goal is to do that rather quickly, not wait until end of August.
Yeah.
Yep. Excellent. Okay. So
let's define who's going to take that role. Just to be clear, is anybody volunteering for that to herd cats?
Well, sorry. Oh, no, sorry. Yeah, not that. As I haven't heard anything yet, I can take on to volunteer first for that action item to talk with Sarah and kind of start herding the cats. I cannot promise yet that I will herd the cats until the end, so I hope that maybe someone else can help or kind of take over afterwards.
I did the first run for the poll, but in the end we agreed that there was no need for a poll.
Yeah.
And I kind of defined we kind of at a high level the responsibilities, so we could look at that in detail.
Okay,
have a chat with Sarah. So
Fabio, and me and Sarah will work on that.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Oh, well, good. We're really good. Next one on the list is project summits. There was kind of discussion about the format of project summits. There's the idea to have a project summit in Denver.
Oh, yeah.
There was some people informally gave me comments they want to have a project summit separately. There was questions about funding. So, for example, whether we could say, yes, we're going to have one and we want to earmark some money for it. So these were kind of questions that were put to me, and actually to many of us, I think, here during the AppSec EU. To give you some feeling, actually the AppSec EU project summit was not excitingly successful from my personal perspective. So some groups met, and then some smaller groups were good, but overall it was less popular than expected. And maybe we didn't do much marketing for it either.
So could we do maybe a wash and rinse on that as well? Like maybe now it's not appropriate, but it'd be great to have the outbriefing on what was good and what was not good. And I see the so-called summits that are now being associated with the AppSec conferences. That is part of the overall conference, not a separate item.
Yeah, I think that one might be one of the mistakes or one of the problems we had here is that they were not perceived or they were not equally managed as the conference. Is that what you mean?
Sorry, yes. Had you but absolutely 100% yes. I know from my experience at AppSec USA, from day one, the activities happening at the summit, quote unquote, was part of the conference planned from the beginning. It has to be its own. Has to be one thing. AppSec includes both our project summit stuff as well as a traditional conference and training. I mean, that should be what an AppSec should be. So I think the failure will be if we don't do that. Then truly we're going back to a summit model. And the elephant in the room there is most people are trying to figure out how to get a free plane flight, and I think that needs to be addressed.
So I will say that when we ran the AppSec conference in 2012, that wasn't as obvious that the project's summit was part of the conference, and it did feel like more of an afterthought. I think that we should probably put a little bit more of this on Laura in making sure that as part of the project organization activities, that the conference organization activities, that the project summit is part of that. And I think that that's really the end result of this conversation, is that we just need to make sure that the staff member who's assigned to handling the conferences make sure that this gets handled as part of the conference.
Hey, a quick note. Jason Johnson, who's helping building our project infrastructure, he just texted me and had two polite things to say. He's like, dear board, we're not cats. Please don't use the term herding cats because we're active technical volunteers who really care about the mission. The second thing he said is summits rock because they're basically a big pep rally that encourages us all to volunteer even more. And Jason, I know you're listening. I think that's a really fair comment, and I will endeavor myself not to use that term. I like to use the term the community, or the OWASP community, or OWASP volunteers. I think those are better terms, so I appreciate your concern.
Yeah, and I apologize for echoing it.
I use it too, so I'm not pointing the finger at anyone. I'm just saying, Jason, Jason Johnson, that's a fair comment. We're super grateful for your work in helping us build project infrastructure, and your comments about summits being a pep rally that encourage more volunteerism. I think you're right. My worry is that we spent so much money on past summits. I think we weren't as fiscally responsible as we could have been. I want to be efficient in how we spend these funds, but I also agree a project summit is really a great idea because it's basically a thank you as well as a pep rally, as well as a lot of chances for collaboration that will encourage additional volunteerism.
If I may add one thing, I can see a huge energy spike coming from a summit. There's one challenge with these is that often afterwards it drops off very quickly, and you don't get a lot of results coming out afterwards. That might be a totally anecdotal perception, but I think it is a challenge for us to find a way that this energy is kept carried through.
And I agree with that 100%. When we have a summit, I really want to see. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was going to say that's because the perks reward system is broken.
We have more of the stick than the carrot these days. I agree with you.
Okay. Do we need to earmark money for a project summit? Or probably that's a question for Sarah, not for us now.
It should be part of the conference piece, as Josh has pointed out. It's now, summit AppSecs by default. Now, OWASP AppSecs are project summits. They're revenue-generating conferences. They're awareness seminars, whatever you want to call them. That's the mission. That's one of our largest fundraisers, and that sort of falls on the back of our staff and our volunteers to work together. Everything should be kind of collapsed under one umbrella.
Can I make one comment here regarding the timing or when to do the summit? Like, when speaking with project leaders, they always find troubling to actually participate in the summit and participate in the conference or the activities regarding the conference at the same time. One idea, and I'm just thinking out loud here, is actually to extend. For example, now we have the conference that finished up yesterday, and to have like a Friday, Saturday, Sunday summit after the conference. So it's kind of a dedicated activity. Probably all the project leaders that wanted to participate in the conference are going to be here, and it's more like a fully focused activity around projects, and not something that is also part of a conference that is ongoing.
I think that statement is tied to the actual running of the event known as AppSec, right? Because you have to look at the many different people that come to the event for many different reasons. It can't be one thing for everybody. So there needs to be activities that will draw people in just to collaborate, perhaps on projects or summits, or maybe see a talk or two. Again, giving options is really what it's about. But I see your point about if you're going to have training, you're going to have dedicated time for training. Maybe during the dedicated time for training, maybe that's the most appropriate time to do a dedicated coding summit.
That's what we did this time. I have one challenge with making this a part of the making a summit part of the conference. I think you need. Actually, I see several challenges.
I'm with you.
First, the budget is actually project summits are per definition loss making. Okay, we pay on that.
Right.
So they are not revenue generating. And the second part is the current staff as we have it, I think is very busy making the conference work and profitable. So I would rather not want to divert them to create the project summit. I mean, if we find someone to help do the project summit, that's fine. But the conference teams right now are extremely busy with doing that. Right. And I don't want to divert their energy towards the project summit.
Well, folks, just to play note, this broadcast is being done on my machine, and within a few minutes I have to leave. So, can we move into a wrap it up, thank the community mode, and call this a meeting?
I think that's okay. Yeah, motion seconded by me. Is it okay for you as well, Josh and Tom?
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like to call out what we. I like to call it though what we didn't complete and when we're going to address it.
Yes. So I think we will schedule on the mailing list when we do our next board meeting. You're absolutely right. I will also then point out the stuff that we have not finished in discussing, including the last one about the project summit. I will send around the notes, and well, I hope we can schedule another board meeting for maybe in a month, 4 weeks time, but that will depend on the availability of all board members. Is that accurate? Is that fair?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, then I make the motion to close.
I want to say thank you to the entire OWASP community. Those of us on the board, we're here because of you. The foundation matters because of your volunteerism. And we're just really grateful that you care enough to listen to this broadcast and participate in the community. That's what it's all about.
And there's an election coming up. So if you want to participate as a board member, self-nominate and get voted in.
Yeah, absolutely. There's actually two things coming up. There's the WASP Awards coming up, which will have end of nomination for June 30.
Yeah, June 30. That's important.
And
yeah.
that's only just a few days. So if you know someone who's cool, who's done great stuff for OWASP, please nominate them. You have only like 3 days left to do so.
And please go to owasp.blogspot.com and you'll see at the top blog post is about the WASP Awards and what you can do to nominate someone about those to get a WASP award.
Yeah, and the second thing is the election, where you still have until mid of August to nominate candidates for the election. Okay, with that, I'm closing the meeting. Thank you very much for coming. This meeting was recorded and will be available afterwards on the owasp.org webpage and linked from there. Thank you very much for coming. Thanks a lot for listening, and have a great day.
Have a great day, everyone. Aloha.